Decades ago, the world suddenly underwent a terrifying mutation. Strange cracks appeared across the planet, and from them emerged countless vicious ghost monsters. Humanity was thrown into chaos as the world entered what later became known as the Mythical Era. Monstrous creatures filled the skies and streets. Giant beasts, undead creatures, and horrifying ghosts attacked cities without warning. Ordinary people could do nothing but run for their lives as civilization stood on the brink of collapse. To survive, humanity began to awaken extraordinary powers. People gained unique professions and mastered powerful skills. Some became swordsmen, some became mages, archers, assassins, and countless other classes. By cultivating their abilities and increasing their ranks, they could continuously grow stronger. These awakened individuals became humanity's greatest defenders. Across the blue planet, they fought endless battles against ghost monsters and terrifying beasts. Through bloodshed and sacrifice, they carved out safe territories where humanity could continue to survive. As more powerful heroes emerged, they led mankind in resisting the invasion. Standing atop the corpses of powerful monsters, they became symbols of hope and strength. Without a doubt, the mythical era became the era of the awakened professionals. On the blue planet, within the Longsha Federation, Haicheng High School welcomed one of the most important days in a student's life, the awakening ceremony. The school grounds were filled with students as a large awakening platform glowed with mysterious runes. Standing before the crowd, combat class instructor Lu Hu announced that the ceremony was officially beginning. He reminded everyone that this day would determine their future destinies and expressed his hope that every student would awaken the profession they desired. Among the crowd stood a young man named Fang Zhou, a freshman at Haicheng High School. As he looked toward the awakening platform, he reflected on his journey. After transmigrating into this world many years ago, the day he had been waiting for had finally arrived. The opportunity to awaken a profession was now right in front of him. Soon, Lu Hu called out Fang Zhou's name and ordered him to step forward. Without hesitation, Fang Zhou answered firmly and walked toward the awakening platform under the gaze of countless students. As he moved forward, whispers immediately spread through the crowd. Some students wondered what profession Fang Zhou would awaken. A few girls quietly discussed it among themselves, guessing that he would become a priest because of his calm and elegant appearance. Others quickly agreed, saying it would be a waste for someone with such handsome looks not to become a priest. While the students continued to speculate, Fang Zhou calmly approached the awakening platform, ready to discover the profession that would shape his future. As Fang Zhou approached the awakening platform, the crowd continued discussing him. Some students argued that being handsome meant nothing in the mythical era. In their eyes, awakened individuals were judged by their professions and strength, not their appearance. Others quickly agreed with that opinion. However, a few students defended Fang Zhou, saying that the critics were simply jealous of his good looks. Meanwhile, instructor Lu Hu reviewed Fang Zhou's records. According to the file, Fang Zhou was an orphan of martyrs. Not only did he possess excellent physical fitness, but his academic results were also outstanding. Looking at the information, Lu Hu understood why so many people were paying attention to him. Standing before the awakening altar, Fang Zhou calmly extended his hand and placed it on the awakening stone. The moment his hand made contact, a dazzling golden light erupted into the sky. The entire platform shook as an overwhelming energy burst outward. The spectators were stunned. Many students exclaimed that the reaction was incredibly powerful. Others wondered if Fang Zhou's awakened profession was truly going to be something heaven-defying. His admirers cheered excitedly, convinced that their idol would awaken an extraordinary profession. As everyone watched in amazement, a mysterious green energy suddenly began swirling around Fang Zhou's hand and surged outward, sweeping across the school grounds like a storm. Everyone present was stunned. Even instructor Lu Hu widened his eyes in shock. He had seen many awakenings before, but this was the first time he had witnessed someone trigger a phenomenon that affected both heaven and earth. He could not help but wonder what kind of incredible profession Fang Zhou had awakened. As the energy continued to expand, a terrifying vision appeared behind Fang Zhou. Countless undead creatures emerged from the darkness. Skeletal warriors in ancient armor stood in formation. Grim reapers carrying giant scythes loomed among the crowd. Ghostly spirits floated through the air, while horrifying undead monsters with glowing eyes filled the battlefield of shadows. Then even more powerful beings appeared. Towering skeletal kings, ancient undead rulers, and mysterious death mages stood behind Fang Zhou like loyal subjects awaiting their master's command. Their overwhelming presence made the scene look like the arrival of an undead empire. At the center of it all stood Fang Zhou, calm and expressionless as the army of death gathered behind him. Moments later, a golden notification appeared before him, announcing his successful awakening as a necromancer. Fang Zhou looked at the message in surprise, realizing that he had awakened one of the rarest and most mysterious professions in the mythical era, Necromancer. Looking at the power he had awakened, he quietly wondered if this was truly his profession. Before he could think further, laughter suddenly erupted from the crowd. Several students burst out laughing. They could not stop mocking him. To them, all the grand phenomena and shocking displays had been meaningless. After making such a huge scene, Fang Zhou had only awakened as a necromancer. They pointed out that although necromancer was a rare profession, it was widely regarded as the absolute bottom among all combat classes. Some laughed even harder, saying that academic excellence had nothing to do with real combat strength. Although the profession appeared powerful on the surface, it possessed a fatal flaw. Necromancers required a sufficiently close connection to the undead realm in order to fully utilize their abilities. The problem was that life and death were naturally opposed to one another. Humans were living beings, while the undead realm belonged to death itself. Because of this contradiction, establishing a connection with the undead realm was incredibly difficult. As a result, most necromancers could never unlock the true potential of their profession. No matter how impressive the awakening looked, they would remain far weaker than other combat classes. That was why the crowd viewed Fang Zhou's awakening with disappointment. To them, his spectacular entrance had ended in failure. As the crowd mocked him, Fang Zhou remained completely calm. He knew something they did not. Necromancers struggled because they could not establish a strong enough connection to the undead realm. Without that connection, their power would always remain limited. But Fang Zhou was different. Because he had awakened the undead realm experience system, for 18 long years the thing he had been waiting for had finally arrived. A glowing green orb floated into his hand as a series of new messages appeared one after another. The system announced that it had automatically connected him to the undead realm and had even generated an undead realm clone for him. According to the system, he could use this skeleton clone to explore the undead realm, devour other undead creatures, and continuously level up to become stronger. The clone could even be summoned into the real world. However, the system also issued a warning. The experience carried unknown risks, and the host should proceed with caution. After reading everything, Fang Zhou's eyes lit up. He immediately understood the value of what he had obtained. For ordinary necromancers, the greatest obstacle was finding a way to connect with the undead realm. Most spent their entire lives unable to overcome that limitation, but this system had solved that problem from the very beginning. As he held the glowing orb in his hand and felt the undead energy surrounding him, Fang Zhou smiled faintly. To him, this system was practically tailor-made for a necromancer. What everyone else considered the weakest profession had suddenly become a path filled with limitless possibilities. A faint smile appeared on Fang Zhou's face. Without hesitation, he activated the system. In an instant, his consciousness connected to a powerful skeleton standing within the undead realm. The skeleton looked down at its own body as Fang Zhou quickly realized that this was the clone created for him by the system. A notification immediately appeared. Before summoning the clone into reality, he could temporarily possess it and personally experience the undead realm through its eyes. The skeleton clone could devour other undead creatures to strengthen its own attributes. Any undead creature slain by the clone could later be summoned by Fang Zhou to fight for him in the real world. Fang Zhou's eyes brightened. If that was true, then as long as he killed enough undead creatures, he would gain an endless army of summons. At that moment, he gazed across the vast and desolate undead realm. Beneath a blood-red moon, countless opportunities awaited him. To Fang Zhou, the entire undead realm had become his personal hunting ground. However, he quickly calmed himself. There would be plenty of time to explore the undead realm later. For now, he decided to save the undead realm experience for another day. Returning his focus to the present, Fang Zhou issued a command to the system. He ordered it to immediately summon the skeleton clone into the real world. The system immediately responded to Fang Zhou's command. It acknowledged the order and began summoning the skeleton clone into the real world. A brilliant green magic circle appeared beneath him, glowing with mysterious runes and overflowing with undead energy. Moments later, a tall skeleton stepped out from the center of the formation. Dark energy swirled around its body as blue flames burned within its eyes. The clone had successfully arrived in reality. Fang Zhou examined it carefully and quickly came to a conclusion. Unlike ordinary summons, this skeleton clone could be directly summoned into the real world at any time. More importantly, it was currently his strongest summon. Just then, the examiner's voice echoed across the field as he called the next student forward. At the same time, the examiner could not help but sigh inwardly. Fang Zhou had clearly shown great talent, yet he had awakened as a necromancer. To him, it felt like a waste of such potential. Meanwhile, several students approached Fang Zhou. Instead of mocking him like the others, they tried to encourage him. One girl told him not to be discouraged. She said that even as a necromancer, she believed he could one day achieve a legendary crown and become someone extraordinary. Another student stared curiously at the skeleton standing beside him. With excitement in her voice, she asked whether that was the skeleton he had summoned. Looking at the imposing undead warrior, she admitted that it looked incredibly cool. As Fang Zhou stood with his skeleton summon, several jealous students watched from a distance. One of them complained bitterly, wondering why girls were still gathering around Fang Zhou even after he had awakened such a supposedly useless profession. Another grumbled that being handsome seemed to let him do whatever he wanted. The blonde young man scoffed and claimed that Fang Zhou could only summon a skeleton. In his eyes, there was no way a single skeleton could be stronger than an assassin. Then a thought crossed his mind. He remembered hearing that novice necromancers could only summon a few skeletons each year. If that skeleton were destroyed, Fang Zhou's leveling speed would be severely affected. So, without warning, he activated a skill called Silent Sleeve Arrow. A hidden arrow shot from his sleeve and streaked silently toward the skeleton summon. However, the skeleton was no ordinary undead. The moment the attack approached, its blue eyes flashed. It instantly detected the incoming threat and turned its head toward the attacker. In that instant, the undead warrior moved to eliminate the one who had dared to attack it. The blonde student stared in confusion. Just a moment ago, the skeleton had been standing beside Fang Zhou, but now it had completely vanished. Before he could understand what had happened, a black blur flashed across the battlefield. The skeleton clone had already crossed the distance between them. Its blue eyes burned with cold, killing intent as it appeared directly beside him. The blonde student's expression froze. He barely had time to turn his head before a skeletal hand slammed into his face. Blood sprayed from the corner of his mouth as the tremendous force sent him reeling backward. The skeleton showed no mercy. Gripping a massive bone club, it swung the weapon down with terrifying strength. The blonde student cried out in panic as the bone club smashed into him and launched him across the ground. Dust exploded into the air while nearby students stumbled back in shock. The blonde student crashed to the ground and stared in disbelief. His face was swollen from the hit, and cold sweat ran down his forehead. He could not understand what had just happened. Struggling to his feet, he looked toward Fang Zhou and the skeleton clone, with shock still written all over his face. At that moment, Fang Zhou calmly questioned his actions and asked what exactly he had been trying to do. The blonde student gritted his teeth and covered his injured cheek. His body trembled slightly from both pain and frustration. Inwardly, he cursed his bad luck. He had never expected Fang Zhou's skeleton to be so formidable. Not only was it incredibly fast, but it had even detected an attack launched from a blind spot and reacted before it could land. The more he thought about it, the more unbelievable it seemed. As a skeleton mage, Fang Zhou should have relied entirely on his summons. No matter how powerful the skeleton was, Fang Zhou's own body should not have been strong. If the summon was too difficult to deal with, then perhaps targeting the summoner himself would be the better option. After all, a mage without his summon should be far easier to handle. So, without thinking, the blonde student made his move. Believing that Fang Zhou himself was the weak point, he leaped forward with a hidden blade in hand and shouted for Fang Zhou to die. The sharp weapon shot straight toward Fang Zhou's head at incredible speed. However, Fang Zhou remained completely calm. At the last moment, he casually raised his hand and caught the incoming blade with 2 fingers. His expression did not change in the slightest. The blonde student's eyes widened in horror. Before he could react, Fang Zhou seized his arm and pulled him off balance. The student let out a panicked scream as his attack completely failed. Looking at him coldly, Fang Zhou spoke in a calm voice, saying that he had greatly overestimated his own abilities. Green-black energy crackled around Feng Zhou's body as he tightened his grip. In the next instant, Feng Zhou launched a powerful counterattack. His fist slammed directly into the blonde student's body with tremendous force. The impact exploded like a cannon blast. The blonde student was sent flying across the field, completely unable to resist. His body tumbled through the air as the crowd watched in stunned silence. What he had believed would be an easy assassination had instead turned into a one-sided defeat. Lu Renjia's body spun through the air before crashing heavily onto the ground. The impact stunned everyone nearby. The surrounding students stared in shock, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Lu Renjia lay on the grass, blood splattered around him, his eyes were wide open, and his mind had gone completely blank. He could not understand how he had been defeated so easily. Feng Zhou glanced at him indifferently. To him, the fight had been nothing more than a waste of time. He casually remarked that the battle had been boring and that he was leaving. With that, Feng Zhou turned around and began walking away as if nothing had happened. Not long after, Instructor Lu Hu approached the scene after hearing the commotion. He looked around in confusion and asked what had happened. One student quickly explained that Lu Renjia had tried to launch a sneak attack on Feng Zhou but had ended up being instantly defeated. Another added that Feng Zhou had taken him down with a single punch. The crowd became even more shocked after hearing that. Everyone knew that necromancers were supposed to have weak physical bodies and relied mainly on their summons. Yet Lu Renjia had not even managed to defeat Feng Zhou himself. After being helped to his feet by a few classmates, Lu Renjia glared in the direction Feng Zhou had left. His body was covered in injuries, and blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Gritting his teeth, he muttered Feng Zhou's name under his breath. The humiliation of being defeated so thoroughly burned inside him. Staring ahead with bloodshot eyes, Lu Renjia clenched his fists and roared that Feng Zhou should just wait. He swore that he would repay today's humiliation someday. Meanwhile, Feng Zhou had already left the noisy crowd behind. He returned to the school building and walked through the empty hallway. Looking around, he confirmed that no one was nearby to disturb him. Feng Zhou calmly called for the system to appear. A moment later, eerie green energy gathered in front of him. A dark undead aura swirled through the air as a strange interface materialized before his eyes. Feng Zhou looked at the floating screen and calmly stated that it was finally time to experience the undead realm. The system immediately responded and asked whether the host wished to begin the undead realm experience. Without hesitation, Feng Zhou prepared to enter the mysterious realm and uncover the opportunities waiting for him there. He knew that the undead realm experience would allow him to understand the undead realm far better. For every necromancer, this was a mandatory trial. If fortune favored him, he might even be able to devour other undead creatures and absorb their power. There was no faster way for a necromancer to grow stronger. However, he remained cautious. He wondered whether everything would really go as smoothly as he hoped. The undead realm was filled with dangerous creatures. In that place, it was impossible to know who would become the hunter and who would become the prey. Still, Feng Zhou understood one truth. Risks and rewards always existed together. After making up his mind, he looked at the system and firmly ordered it to begin the undead realm experience. The system immediately responded and asked him to wait a moment. Dark green energy continued to swirl around the room as Feng Zhou stood calmly in the center. He thought about how he had waited 18 long years for the system to appear. There was no way he would waste such a precious chance to become stronger. A short while later, the system completed its preparations. A new message appeared before him, warning that the undead realm experience carried an unknown level of danger. It asked whether he wished to proceed. Without the slightest hesitation, Feng Zhou selected confirm. The moment his choice was made, the surrounding undead energy erupted. A strange green light filled the room, and a mysterious magic circle appeared beneath his feet. Suddenly, Feng Zhou sensed something unusual. His eyes widened slightly as the dark energy around him twisted and surged, signaling that the journey into the terrifying undead realm was about to begin. A moment later, Feng Zhou appeared within this strange realm. He stood silently and observed his surroundings. Jagged mountains rose in the distance beneath the eerie red moon, while dark mist drifted across the wasteland. For a brief moment he remained speechless. Then he noticed something familiar. The place looked exactly like the environment where he had previously summoned his skeleton warrior. Realizing this, he wondered if this was truly the undead realm experience the system had mentioned. As he examined the situation, a green system panel appeared before him, displaying information about his current body. He had entered the undead realm in the form of a skeleton clone. The clone's rank was apprentice, and all of its attributes were at the lowest level. Its strength, constitution, agility, and spirit were all only 1 point. It possessed no equipment and only one racial skill. The skill was called skeletal armament. According to the system, it was an instinct unique to the skeleton race. Through this ability, a skeleton could use bones to strengthen itself and forge equipment from them. At the same time, Fang Zhou carefully examined the information panel and focused on the skeleton's only racial skill. It was an innate ability called skeletal armament. As he read the description, he quickly realized that this was the same ability his summoned skeleton had used before. Through this instinctive skill, skeletons could use bones to strengthen themselves and even forge weapons and equipment. Understanding its value, Fang Zhou immediately decided to make use of it. In a place as dangerous as the undead realm, entering battle unarmed would be foolish. To improve his chances of survival, he concluded that forging a weapon before encountering any enemies was the safest choice. The skeleton clone began gathering bones and preparing to create its first weapon. However, just as Fang Zhou was making his preparations, danger arrived far sooner than expected. A sudden warning filled his mind. A ferocious wolf-like creature burst out from the shadows with terrifying speed. Its mouth was wide open, revealing rows of sharp fangs as it lunged directly toward the skeleton. Fang Zhou was caught completely off guard. He immediately leaped backward and narrowly avoided the wolf's claws. Looking at the beast, he realized that the undead realm was indeed filled with hidden dangers. Before he could fully recover, the two-headed wolf launched another fierce assault. Fang Zhou tried to dodge, but his foot became tangled at the worst possible moment. Seeing the wolf rushing toward him, he remained calm and muttered that if that was the case, then he had another idea. In an instant, he swung his body and pulled the skeleton from the ground that had become tangled around his foot. He then kicked the skeleton's head, sending it flying straight toward the wolf's head. The beast simply shook its head and continued glaring at him with its crimson eyes. Fang Zhou stared in disbelief as cold sweat ran down his skull. Seeing this, he realized that the kick had absolutely no effect at all. Fang Zhou struggled to keep up as the two-headed wolf continuously attacked from different directions. Every movement felt awkward, and he quickly realized that controlling a skeleton's body was much harder than he had imagined. The wolf kept circling and launching relentless assaults. He dodged as best as he could, but he knew things could not continue like this. While retreating, his eyes suddenly landed on a nearby pile of bones. A plan immediately formed in his mind. At that moment, blue energy surged around the scattered bones. The pile of bones instantly flew together and merged into a massive skeletal weapon. Without hesitation, Fang Zhou swung it forward and shouted for the beast to die. The attack slammed directly into the wolf, sending a powerful impact through its body. However, the two-headed wolf was far tougher than expected. It snarled fiercely and pushed forward despite the hit. Fang Zhou continued fighting at close range, circling the beast and striking from multiple directions. The battle grew increasingly intense as claws, fangs, and bone weapons collided again and again. Suddenly, back in the real world, Fang Zhou realized something after being attacked by the wolf. The injuries suffered inside the undead realm were also transferred to reality. He concluded that this mysterious system was far more dangerous than he had originally imagined. However, he quickly shifted his attention back to the battle. Since one wolf head was already dead, there was no reason to let it go to waste. The skeleton raised a hand toward the corpse and issued a command. Dark energy surged forward and wrapped around the dead wolf head. At the same time, the skill skeletal armament activated once more. He grabbed the dead wolf head and transformed it into long skeletal chains. The chains shot through the air like living serpents and coiled around the wolf's body. The beast immediately struggled and roared furiously, trying to break free. Blood splattered as the chains tightened around it from every direction. The chains whipped through the battlefield repeatedly, slashing and piercing the wolf's body over and over. Each strike left fresh wounds across its fur and flesh. After defeating the two-headed wolf, Fang Zhou looked at its corpse and evaluated the battle. He admitted that skeletal armament was even more useful than he had expected. As a skill granted by the mysterious system, its versatility far exceeded his initial assumptions. Just as he was reflecting on the fight, a strange blue flame suddenly rose from the wolf's corpse. The eerie flame hovered above the dead beast, pulsing with an unusual energy. The moment he saw it, a powerful sensation surged through him, an overwhelming hunger. The feeling struck so suddenly that it caught him off guard. He could not understand why he desired the flame so badly. Then, as if responding to his instinct, a thought emerged deep within his consciousness. Eat it. Devour. Power. Evolve. The words echoed repeatedly in his mind. The hunger consumed his thoughts. Finally, he raised his hand and pulled the blue flame toward himself. Without hesitation, he opened his mouth and swallowed the mysterious soul-like fire in a single gulp. After swallowing the blue soul flame, Fang Zhou felt a surge of energy flow through his body. A green system notification immediately appeared before him. The newly absorbed power was quickly converted into his attributes. His strength, constitution, agility, and spirit attributes all increased slightly. He concluded that this was likely one of the effects granted by skeletal armament. Just then he received another notification telling him that his soul power had also increased slightly. Fang Zhou stared at the new stat with curiosity and wondered what soul power could actually do. The system quickly provided an explanation. Soul power was converted from soul energy and had many different uses. It could be used to deduce and develop skills, increase one's potential, and even enhance equipment. In other words, the path forward was simple. As long as he continued hunting and gathering soul energy, he could keep growing stronger without stopping. After learning how the system worked, Fang Zhou looked across the desolate undead land and felt a surge of excitement. A realization flashed through his mind. He could grow infinitely. As long as he kept hunting and gathering soul energy, there seemed to be no limit to how strong he could become. While he was thinking, movement suddenly caught his attention. A ragged skeleton warrior approached from the distance. The system immediately displayed its information. It was a basic skeleton, the cannon fodder commonly summoned by necromancers. It was only an apprentice-level undead creature. Its body was fragile, it possessed no intelligence, and its greatest weakness was the soul fire burning inside its skull. Seeing that, Fang Zhou immediately became interested. He activated skeletal armament once more and successfully forged a piece of equipment, Bone Spear. Without hesitation, he rushed forward and struck. The enemy skeleton was blown away by the attack before it could even react. As the blue soul fire was absorbed, his agility and soul power increased slightly. Seeing this, Fang Zhou's eyes glowed brighter. The increase confirmed his theory. Every undead creature he hunted could become nourishment for his growth. He continued his assault without slowing down. His spear pierced through another skeleton, shattering its bones. The moment its soul fire was devoured, the system rewarded him again. He started to feel his body becoming stronger with every kill. His path was becoming clearer and clearer. Every enemy he defeated was merely another stepping stone toward evolution. After countless battles, Fang Zhou stood amid piles of broken bones. Blue soul fire flickered within his eyes as he examined his current status. His attributes had risen significantly. Strength 3, Agility 2, Constitution 2, Spirit 2, Soul Power 10. Yet instead of being satisfied, he shook his head. This level of power was still far from enough. He could become even stronger. As that thought echoed through his mind, the scene suddenly shifted to reality. At Haicheng High School, Fang Zhou was standing quietly, still immersed in thoughts of becoming stronger and continuing his endless path of growth. Just as he was thinking, a familiar voice suddenly interrupted him. His classmate Bei Xiaoshen saw him standing in the empty hallway. She looked at him and asked what he was doing there. Startled, Fang Zhou snapped out of his thoughts and turned toward the source of the voice. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. Standing before him was Bei Xiaoshen. After recognizing her, he asked in confusion why she was there. Bai Xiaochen stared at him nervously. Her eyes soon fell on the bloodstain on his hand and she immediately became worried. She hesitated before speaking. Even if the profession he had awakened was not ideal, he should not hurt himself just to vent his frustration. Fang Zhou was stunned. He had no idea how she had arrived at such a conclusion. At that moment, he realized that Bai Xiaochen had completely misunderstood the situation. The injury on his hand had nothing to do with self-harm. Unable to explain the truth, Fang Zhou could only sigh inwardly. He thought that the next time he entered the undead realm, he would have to find a quieter place where no one could disturb him. Trying to calm her concerns, he casually told her that he was fine and that the wound was only a small scratch caused by carelessness. Bai Xiaoshan looked at him doubtfully and asked if that was really true. Feng Zhou nodded and reassured her again. After a brief silence, he changed the subject. He reminded her that meditation class was about to begin and that they should hurry back to class. Bai Xiaochen immediately agreed. The two of them then walked down the corridor together toward their classroom. As Feng Zhou and Bai Xiaochen walked through the corridor, Feng Zhou suddenly coughed. His body swayed slightly, causing Bai Xiaochen's expression to change immediately. She hurried to his side and grabbed his arm, telling him that he was obviously not fine. She insisted on taking him to the infirmary. Feng Zhou quickly reassured her that he was all right, but inwardly he finally understood what was happening. Entering the undead realm seemed to place a certain burden on his body. At that moment, a green notification screen appeared before him. It informed him that he had spent too much time in the undead realm today and warned him to pay attention to his physical condition. Seeing the message, Feng Zhou's eyes widened slightly. Then another discovery caught his attention. His own attributes had increased as well. His skills now included Summon Skeleton and a mysterious new ability called Deducible Skill. While Bai Xiaochen stood beside him, still worried and asking whether he was truly okay, Feng Zhou's attention remained fixed on the new skill. He stared at the words Deducible Skill and began to think, could this ability allow him to do what only the most powerful awakened individuals could do? A bold idea suddenly appeared in his mind. Perhaps he could use this skill not only to learn abilities but also to create entirely new ones. The possibility filled him with excitement. Feng Zhou clenched his fists, thinking that if his guess was correct, then his future potential might be far greater than he had ever imagined. He might one day create his own unique skills and walk a path unlike anyone else's. Sometime later, at Haicheng High School's teaching building, the students gathered inside a large lecture hall for their first meditation class. A woman with long red hair stepped onto the stage and introduced herself. Her name was Shen Hongyu, and she was the instructor responsible for teaching meditation. She was a silver lower rank fire mage. With a wave of her hand, glowing books appeared on the students' desks. Shen Hongyu explained that the book contained the basic meditation method corresponding to their professions. She instructed everyone to use meditation to display their professional abilities. She then explained that meditation could increase spirit power, which served as the foundation for using professional skills. However, she told the students not to be anxious if they failed at first. According to her, it was completely normal. She even boasted that, despite being a genius, it had taken her half a month of training just to barely reach that stage. Feng Zhou remained silent as he listened to her words. At that moment, a system notification suddenly appeared before his eyes, telling him that the system had detected a learnable skill, Skeleton Meditation Method. It could be quickly deduced to the entry stage. Without hesitation, Feng Zhou reached out and selected yes. The learning process immediately began. As soon as the learning process started, green streams of energy surged around Feng Zhou. Strange symbols surrounded his body as the skeleton meditation method was rapidly absorbed into his mind. In an instant, Feng Zhou's consciousness merged with a skeleton clone, and he successfully learned the skill, Skeleton Meditation Method. Feng Zhou was surprised by how quickly he had mastered it. Just then, another description appeared. Skeleton Meditation Method. Apprentice-level entry stage. A basic meditation method for necromancers that slowly increases the spirit attribute by visualizing a skeleton. After reading the explanation, Feng Zhou was not surprised at all. To ordinary people, visualizing a skeleton might be difficult, but for him, it was no different from looking at his own skeleton clone. Feng Zhou quickly realized another advantage. As long as he did not enter the undead realm experience, the skeleton clone would continue meditating automatically. In other words, he could cultivate 24 hours a day without stopping. He immediately understood that this was one of the benefits granted by the system's innate Necromancer holy body. Just then, another system notification appeared. Host spirit ability has increased. You may enter the undead realm experience again. Feng Zhou narrowed his eyes. He knew that entering the undead realm consumed spirit power. Because of that, he could not afford to neglect the training of either his main body or his skeleton clone. Without hesitation, Feng Zhou made his decision. He quickly entered the undead realm. After entering the undead realm once again, Feng Zhou's skeleton clone immediately resumed hunting within the barren land of death. The clone charged across the battlefield and struck down undead creatures one after another with its bone weapon. Watching the gains accumulate, Fang Zhou felt a surge of excitement. He realized that he could once again hunt to his heart's content and steadily grow stronger. Soon a system notification appeared before him, telling him that a clone skill had reached proficiency. It can be used as skill material to deduce an unknown skill for the main body. Estimated cost, 10 points of soul power. Fang Zhou's eyes narrowed in interest. He remembered the system mentioning skill deduction before. It seemed that the deduction process had to be performed inside the undead realm. Without wasting any time, he decided to test it. Immediately, green flames surged around the system interface. A mysterious symbol appeared as the system began analyzing the available materials. The deduction process continued for several moments while the progress bar steadily advanced. At last, the result appeared. Skill deduction successful. A brand new skill was born. Bone Javelin. The system displayed its description. Bone Javelin, apprentice level, proficient, condenses a bone javelin and throws it at enemies. It deals both armor-piercing physical damage and death energy damage. Its quantity, power, and range depend on the user's spirit attribute and skill proficiency. Fang Zhou looked at the newly acquired skill and immediately smiled. The bone javelin perfectly matched the weapon his skeleton clone had been using all along. After obtaining the bone javelin skill, Fang Zhou discovered that it came with an entire derivative skill tree. At the top of the tree was Bone Javelin, and beneath it were several advanced branches, including Bone Shield, Giant Bone Claw, and Bone Prison. Seeing this, Fang Zhou was pleasantly surprised. He had not expected the skill to provide an entire evolution path. However, after examining it more closely, he realized that unlocking those advanced skills would require much more soul power. For now, all he could do was continue accumulating soul power through hunting. While thinking about his next steps, Fang Zhou suddenly noticed something unusual. Not far away, several undead skeletons were wandering across the wasteland. The moment they sensed his presence, they appeared terrified and tried to flee. Fang Zhou's eyes lit up. A smile spread across his skeletal face. Since suitable targets had appeared on their own, he could use them to test his newly acquired skill. Without hesitation, Fang Zhou activated Bone Javelin, a gigantic bone spear condensed in the air, wrapped in blue death energy. The javelin shot forward like a bolt of lightning and slammed into the ground among the fleeing skeletons. The impact was devastating. The earth cracked apart as the undead creatures were instantly shattered into piles of broken bones. After witnessing the result, Fang Zhou nodded in satisfaction. The power of Bone Javelin far exceeded ordinary apprentice-level skills such as Death Missile and Ray of Enfeeblement. Its destructive force was clearly on a completely different level. After testing Bone Javelin, Fang Zhou noticed something unexpected. The rewards from defeating the weak skeletons had decreased significantly. When he checked his status, he realized that his attributes were not rising like before. Fang Zhou quickly understood what was happening. The system was clearly preventing him from endlessly farming weak undead for easy growth. If he wanted larger rewards, he would have to venture deeper into the more dangerous regions of the undead realm. However, before doing that, there was still something important he needed to obtain: Bone Essence. Until he acquired enough bone essence, he would continue hunting and devouring these low-level undead to strengthen himself. Back in the real world, Fang Zhou sat quietly in the classroom while his consciousness remained focused on the undead realm. As he watched his strength steadily increase, a grin slowly appeared on his face. A faint chuckle escaped him. The sound immediately caught Shen Hongyu's attention. Curious, teacher Shen Hongyu walked over and gently tapped his shoulder, calling out to him. Fang Zhou snapped back to reality. Shen Hongyu frowned slightly and asked why everyone else was concentrating on meditation while he was sitting there giggling to himself. Fang Zhou awkwardly opened his mouth, unsure how to explain. Before he could answer, another student suddenly spoke up. The student confidently declared that he knew the reason. In his opinion, Fang Zhou had simply failed to enter a meditative state. Another student questioned that conclusion, pointing out that rare professions were supposed to have superior meditation effects. A classmate immediately corrected him, explaining that it depended on the specific rare profession. He then added that very few people had ever awakened as necromancers. Because of that, the skeleton meditation method available to necromancers was rumored to be incomplete. As a result, it would not be surprising if Fang Zhou found it difficult or even impossible to enter a meditative state. Hearing everyone discuss him as if he had failed, Fang Zhou could only remain silent. Teacher Shen looked at Feng Zhou with a serious expression and told him that she understood meditation was difficult for his profession. However, she warned him not to give up on himself so easily. She then pointed out that because he was the only student not seriously trying, the entire class was having its time wasted. To make her point, she gestured toward Li Renjie. She praised him for his hard work, saying that in just a single class he had already meditated enough to materialize the handle of a knife. Li Renjie smiled modestly and thanked Teacher Shen for the compliment. Even so, he claimed that he had only comprehended about 1/3 of the meditation methods so far. According to him, his cultivation speed was merely at the level of an average genius. Then he turned toward Feng Zhou with a smug look and said that Feng Zhou should now understand the gap between a necromancer and other professions. Hearing that, Feng Zhou let out a faint chuckle. He calmly replied that such a speed was indeed very average. The entire classroom fell silent. Li Renjie's eyes widened in disbelief. He could hardly believe what he had just heard. Recovering from the shock, he immediately pointed at Feng Zhou and angrily declared that Feng Zhou could not even enter a meditative state. He told him to look at his own situation before bragging. At that moment, Feng Zhou released a terrifying aura that made the atmosphere turn cold and oppressive. Li Renjie's expression instantly changed. The arrogance on his face disappeared as fear took its place. Instinctively, he stepped back. The overwhelming presence looming behind Feng Zhou made it clear that he was not someone to be taken lightly. Teacher Shen quickly called out to Li Renjie, telling him to focus his mind and calm down. Then she turned toward Feng Zhou with a displeased expression and asked what he thought he was doing. She reminded him that this was a meditation class meant for learning meditation, not a place for aggressive brawling. Any fighting could wait until combat class. Feng Zhou calmly rested a hand on the desk and explained that he had only wanted Li Renjie to step aside. A faint smile appeared on his face as he continued speaking. He said he simply wanted to show Teacher Shen his meditation progress. The classroom immediately became restless. A silver-haired girl stared at him in surprise and wondered if Feng Zhou had actually succeeded in meditation. Even if he had, she thought he should have only completed around 1/10 of the entry stage at most. Meanwhile, many students looked toward Feng Zhou with curiosity and doubt. Ignoring everyone's reactions, Feng Zhou slowly activated the technique. Skeleton meditation method. In the next instant, dark energy erupted from his body. Black streams of power surged upward like countless shadowy tendrils, filling the classroom with a chilling aura. Powerful waves of energy spread in every direction, causing the air itself to tremble. The students could only stare in shock as the dark currents continued to rise around Feng Zhou. Teacher Shen also stared at Feng Zhou in disbelief. She could hardly understand how it was possible. In the span of a single class, Feng Zhou had actually reached the entry stage of the skeleton meditation method. Feng Zhou stood calmly beneath the giant skeleton and casually thought that, at this speed, compared to an average genius, he should be at least 100 million times better. At that moment, Instructor Lu Hu suddenly stepped forward. After observing Feng Zhou's aura, he admitted that Feng Zhou's progress with the meditation method was quite impressive. Then, to everyone's surprise, he announced that there would be a test the next day. The announcement immediately caused an uproar throughout the classroom. Several students jumped to their feet in shock. Some wondered if they were already going to have combat class, while others complained that they had not even reached the entry stage of their own meditation methods yet. As the room buzzed with complaints, Li Renjie narrowed his eyes and looked toward Feng Zhou. A cold smile appeared on his face. He reminded Feng Zhou that combat class was completely different from meditation. In the field he excelled at, he intended to show everyone the difference between them. Inwardly mocking Feng Zhou as nothing more than a weak chicken mage, Li Renjie looked forward to seeing how long Feng Zhou could keep up his confident act once the real fighting began. Meanwhile, in the desolate lands of the undead realm, Feng Zhou moved through the Crimson Wasteland surrounded by dark flames and eerie undead energy. After reaching the entry stage of the skeleton meditation method, Feng Zhou noticed that the amount of time it could remain inside the undead realm had increased significantly. Even so, it had no intention of slowing down. Feng Zhou clenched its weapon and reminded itself that it could not afford to slack off. Its spirit power was limited, and before it was exhausted, it needed to hunt and destroy as many undead creatures as possible. Filled with determination, Feng Zhou charged forward. Its glowing blue eyes burned with fighting spirit as it shouted for more enemies. Like a black whirlwind, it rushed into the horde. It swung its weapon with tremendous force, striking an undead creature head-on. A powerful impact exploded across the battlefield as another enemy was cut down, while the skeleton continued its relentless hunt through the undead realm. Fang Zhou tore through the battlefield like an unstoppable storm. Bones shattered and dust filled the air wherever it passed. Looking at the countless undead falling before it, the skeleton realized that it could kill even more enemies than before. After another fierce round of slaughter, it finally slowed down. White mist escaped from its mouth as it tightened its grip on its weapon. The battlefield around it was covered with broken bones and shattered remains. Standing among the piles of corpses, it examined its condition and concluded that its spirit power was nearly exhausted for the day. Continuing to fight any longer would be difficult. Just then, a system screen suddenly appeared before its eyes, informing it that its professional level had increased and that its accompanying skeleton clone could now be strengthened. Seeing the message, Fang Zhou was pleasantly surprised. It realized that all of its hard work had not been in vain. Without hesitation, it selected the confirmation option. The moment the choice was made, a surge of dark green energy erupted around its body. A powerful undead aura swirled through the air as mysterious symbols and lightning-like energy gathered around the skeleton. The clone upgrade process immediately began, and the surrounding undead energy rushed toward it like a tide. As the upgrade process continued, streams of green energy flowed into the skeleton's body. The blue flames within its eyes burned brighter, and a powerful aura spread from every bone in its body. Soon, the results of the upgrade appeared before it. The skeleton clone had successfully advanced to the middle apprentice rank. Its strength, constitution, agility, spirit, and soul power had all improved. It also retained its bone spear and skeletal armament abilities. Most importantly, the upgrade had granted it a brand new skill, Brutal Strike. The notification explained that Brutal Strike was an apprentice-level entry-stage skill. It allowed the user to unleash an instant burst of immense power against an enemy. The strength of the attack depended on the user's strength attribute and skill proficiency. Fang Zhou was delighted by the discovery. It had never expected that upgrading could directly grant new skills. After reading the description, it became even more satisfied. With Brutal Strike, hunting undead creatures would become much faster and more efficient. However, while studying the new skill, its body suddenly trembled. A blue glow flickered around it as weakness washed over its bones. Only then did it realize its mistake. It had been so focused on examining the newly acquired skill that it had forgotten its spirit power was already overdrawn. The exhaustion hit immediately, forcing it to stop. The next moment, its consciousness began to fade from the undead realm. When it opened its eyes again, it had returned to the sports field of Haicheng High School. Fang Zhou suddenly felt a sharp headache the moment he returned from the undead realm. He held his head and grimaced in pain. His spirit power was still far too low, and the backlash from overusing it left him feeling terrible. Noticing his condition, Bai Xiaochen approached him with concern. She asked what was wrong, pointing out that ever since the meditation class, he had looked exhausted every day. Fang Zhou forced a smile and told her that he was fine. He explained that he had simply been practicing for too long every day. However, deep down he knew that the system and the existence of the undead realm could never be revealed to anyone. From now on, he decided that he would only enter the undead realm when he was alone. Just then, a mocking voice sounded nearby. Lu Renjie sneered that necromancers were truly a worthless profession. In his opinion, Fang Zhou had become so weak simply from meditating a little longer. He added that even if Fang Zhou had reached the entry stage of the meditation method, it meant nothing. A profession could only prove itself through strength. Hearing this, Bai Xiaochen immediately became angry and told him that he was going too far. She questioned why he was always targeting Fang Zhou when Fang Zhou had never offended him. Lu Renjie merely shrugged and claimed that he was only speaking the truth. Fang Zhou looked at him calmly and asked if Lu Renjie wanted another beating. A cold light flashed across Lu Renjie's eyes. He replied that he was no longer the same person he had been a week ago. He proudly announced that he had already learned a professional skill. With that skill, he claimed he would only need a single move to defeat Fang Zhou. Just as the tension was about to explode, a loud voice interrupted them. Teacher Lu arrived and ordered everyone to stop immediately. He reminded the students that the school's purpose was to teach them skills to kill vicious ghosts in the future, not to fight among themselves. Lu Renjia immediately lowered his head and admitted his mistake. Teacher Lu then turned toward Fang Zhou. He acknowledged Fang Zhou's excellent meditation class results but reminded him that combat classes were equally important and required just as much effort. Fang Zhou nodded and agreed. As Teacher Lu walked away, Fang Zhou watched his back thoughtfully. He could not help feeling that Teacher Lu seemed to be intentionally looking out for him. Teacher Lu suddenly raised his voice and ordered all the students to assemble on the sports field. The students immediately responded and rushed over to gather in formation. After everyone had arrived, Teacher Lu instructed an assistant to bring the equipment forward. Moments later, a large object covered with a cloth was wheeled onto the field. The students looked at it curiously. When the cloth was removed, a strange mechanical golem with horns was revealed. Teacher Lu introduced it as an apprentice-level test golem. He explained that it was specifically designed to measure a student's attack and defense capabilities, using the weakest standard combat unit of the Abyss Demons, the Imp, as a reference. The golem's attack power and defense power were both set at 100. According to Teacher Lu, a defense value of 100 was enough to withstand the Imp's sharp claws head-on. Looking at the somewhat battered machine, one of the students questioned whether it might be broken by the students during testing. Teacher Lu laughed and firmly stated that no new student had ever managed to destroy one of these test golems. He then made a bold announcement. If any student could dismantle a golem using their own strength during today's test, he, Lu Hu, would personally apply for a reward of 20 Alliance contribution points on that student's behalf. The moment those words were spoken, the entire crowd erupted with excitement. Many students were stunned that Teacher Lu was willing to offer 20 Alliance contribution points so casually. Others immediately became motivated, laughing and declaring that they finally had a reason to give it their all during the test. Fang Zhou silently recalled that in this world, contribution points functioned as a circulating currency. They were required to purchase equipment, resources, and even valuable skills. Because of that, the promise of 20 contribution points was enough to make every student excited. The students immediately began volunteering for the test. One after another, they raised their hands and asked for a chance to go first. Teacher Lu told everyone to line up and announced that the testing would begin with the common professions. The first student stepped forward, a fire element user. Flames wrapped around his body as he formed a spell and unleashed a blazing fireball toward the test golem. The explosion looked impressive, but when the smoke cleared, Teacher Lu calmly announced the result. The student's attack capability was only 48, and he still needed much more practice. The student was stunned. He had clearly felt considerable power behind the attack and could not understand how the score had ended up so low. After him, more students took their turns. A swordsman rushed forward and unleashed a powerful crippling strike, earning a score of 41. Soon afterward, an archer fired a petrifying arrow and achieved a score of 50. One by one, the common profession students completed their tests, but none of them managed to produce an outstanding result. When the final common profession student finished, Teacher Lu announced that all common profession testing had ended. The remaining special profession students could now come forward in order. The students immediately began discussing the results among themselves. One student sighed and pointed out that none of the common professions had managed to reach a score of 60. Another finally understood why Teacher Lu had been so generous with the reward. There was simply no way ordinary students could earn those 20 contribution points. As the crowd continued talking, some began looking toward the special profession students with anticipation. They could not help but wonder what kind of scores those rare and powerful hidden professions would achieve. Fang Zhou quietly watched the ongoing tests and wondered whether the test golem could calculate the combined strength of both a summoner and their summoned creatures. Before he could think further, Lu Renjia walked over and mocked him, claiming that his attack power was probably among the lowest in the class. To prove his superiority, Lu Renjia rushed toward the test golem and unleashed his newly learned skill, Phantom Dagger. A crimson arc slashed through the air and struck the golem, earning him a score of 80 attack power. Teacher Lu announced the result, and Lu Renjia immediately boasted about the strength of his hidden profession, the Phantom Assassin, only for Bai Xiaochen to remind him that he was not the only student with a hidden profession. The examination continued as Ye Fan stepped forward for his test. Since he had awakened the rare demon hunter profession and had even attracted the attention of the academy's upper management, many students eagerly watched to see his performance. Green energy surged around him as he summoned a demonic blade and launched Vengeance Strike, producing an initial score of 65. While the crowd was confused by the seemingly average result, Ye-Fan calmly continued attacking. The score rapidly climbed from 65 to 88 and finally reached 100 after a powerful finishing strike. Instructor Lu Hu immediately announced the result, earning Ye-Fan the admiration of the surrounding students. Watching from the side, Feng Zhou finally understood how the test worked. The golem did not measure only the power of a single attack, it calculated cumulative damage as well. A faint smile appeared on his face. If cumulative damage counted toward the final score, then achieving an outstanding result would be easy for him. After all, his true strength did not lie in one powerful attack but in the endless assaults of his summoned skeleton army. Looking across the training ground, Ye-Fan judged the situation calmly. From what he could see, it seemed that no one in the class could surpass him. Confident in himself, he believed there was no opponent there who could stand above him. However, after seeing the results, someone clicked his tongue in frustration. He complained that the score had only been achieved by stacking attacks, and if he had known that earlier, he would have attacked a few more times as well. Hearing that, Bai Xiaochen questioned where an assassin like him would even get a combo skill. Soon after, the instructor called Bai Xiaochen forward. She immediately answered and stepped up nervously. As a hidden professional, she reminded herself that she could not embarrass herself too badly. Green energy began to gather around her as she released her power, creating a storm-like swirl of wind around her body. When the test result appeared, the instructor announced that Bai Xiaochen's attack ability was 31. Seeing the low score, Bai Xiaochen was frustrated and realized that the combat power of a support profession was truly too low. Someone nearby burst into laughter and mocked her, saying she had talked big, yet that was all the capability she had. He added that if he had awakened the assassin profession, his attack ability would definitely have exceeded 80. After that, the instructor called Gu Zheqiu next. Gu Zheqiu, a storm mage, stepped forward and activated Chain Wind Energy Missile. Blue wind energy gathered around him and struck the test target. His attack ability was measured at 72. Next came Zhao Yuan, an Earth Knight. He charged forward with Shield Armor Charge, crashing into the target with heavy force. His attack ability was recorded as 69. Then Chen Yong, a heavy hammer warrior, launched Giant Hammer Smash. His powerful strike landed with explosive force, and his attack ability reached 84. Watching the results, Ye-Fan noted that their attack abilities were all much higher than his, but even so, none of them had reached 100. Someone in the crowd said it was a pity that even a score of 100 could not break the test golem, meaning Teacher Lu's contribution points would not be given out. Another student disagreed, pointing out that there was still one hidden professional who had not tested yet. The others quickly realized he was right. The final hidden professional, the Necromancer Fang Zhou, still remained. The students continued looking toward Fang Zhou, but several of them clearly did not believe he could do anything impressive. One blonde student mocked the others for counting on a Necromancer, saying that Fang Zhou probably would not even be able to reach 10 points of attack ability. Another student laughed and agreed with him. The blonde student added that it was not even certain whether Fang Zhou's skeletons could stand up properly. Fang Zhou calmly asked if they were truly so sure he could not earn the 20 contribution points. The blonde student laughed even harder and asked what else he was supposed to believe. He then pointed at the test golem and arrogantly declared that if Fang Zhou could break it as well, he would eat the test golem right on the spot. Hearing this, Fang Zhou simply reminded him that he had said those words himself. The blonde student was briefly confused and asked what he meant. Fang Zhou then stepped forward and asked everyone to move back a little. Seeing this, the blonde student mocked him again, asking if Fang Zhou was afraid his test data would be too poor and everyone would laugh at him. Fang Zhou calmly denied it. A dark, terrifying aura began to spread around him as lightning flashed across the sky and black chains appeared in the air. He explained that the reason he asked them to step back was because the skill he was about to release needed to occupy a relatively large amount of space. In the next moment, multiple skeletons emerged behind him, surrounded by eerie green energy and rattling chains. Their glowing blue eyes and terrifying presence immediately silenced the crowd. The students stared in shock. One of them shouted in disbelief, asking if those were really 10 skeletons and whether Fang Zhou was joking. Another student remembered that a newly awakened apprentice-level necromancer could usually summon only 2 skeletons. Someone else wondered if Feng Zhou had already advanced to the level of a black iron mage. Even the instructor was stunned. He recalled that Su Xinyan, known as the most talented necromancer in history, had only been able to summon 5 skeletons when she had first awakened, yet Feng Zhou had summoned 10 at once. Seeing Feng Zhou standing before the test golem with 10 skeletons behind him, the instructor could not help wondering whether Feng Zhou's talent was actually even stronger than Su Xinyan's. Feng Zhou, however, remained calm. Inwardly, he felt fortunate that he had held back a little. Otherwise, the attention he attracted might have become even greater. Without wasting any more time, Feng Zhou gave the command to attack. The skeletons immediately rushed forward at incredible speed, surprising the watching students. One of them exclaimed in shock at how fast the skeletons were. The skeletons charged toward the test golem one after another, striking it with their bony fists. Their attacks landed rapidly, forcing the test value to rise step by step. The numbers jumped from 30 to 45, then to 60, and finally stopped at 65. The impact created a huge commotion, but some students quickly noticed that the final attack value was not especially high. One student admitted that 65 was already not bad, since many warriors could not even reach that level. However, another mocked Feng Zhou, saying that even after using so many skeletons, he had only reached that little value, proving that necromancers were still too weak. The blonde student laughed again and asked whether that was all Feng Zhou had. Only 65 points. He ridiculed him further, saying that on average, a single skeleton could not even reach 10 points of attack ability. Feng Zhou remained completely composed and told them not to rush, because this was only the beginning. The blonde student immediately questioned what he meant and asked whether Feng Zhou was still trying to put up a dying struggle. Feng Zhou raised his hand, his eyes glowing with eerie green light. If 10 skeletons were not enough, then he would simply make it 20. As his command fell, even more skeletons emerged around him, filling the area with a chilling deathly aura. The surrounding students were instantly shocked. They realized that Feng Zhou had actually been holding back earlier. Looking at the number of skeletons around him, they counted at least 20 and wondered whether there had ever been such a powerful necromancer in history. Bai Xiaochen watched the scene with a confident smile, feeling that she had known all along that Feng Zhou could definitely do it. The skeletons launched their attack again. One after another, they struck the test golem with incredible speed and force. The number on the golem's display rose rapidly, climbing past 70, then 90, and finally breaking through 100. The attacks continued without stopping, and the golem's body began to crack under the pressure. A violent explosion erupted across the training ground. Flames and shockwaves swept outward, forcing the crowd to shield themselves as the test golem's display shattered. For a moment, everyone fell silent. Then someone shouted in disbelief. Feng Zhou's score was not 65 at all. The test golem's tolerance limit had been broken through by him. The students could barely believe it. Feng Zhou had only just awakened, yet he had already pushed the machine beyond its limit. To them, he no longer seemed human. He seemed completely inhuman. The blonde student stood frozen, unable to laugh anymore. He stared at the shattered display in shock as the broken screen showed 999. Realizing that Feng Zhou had exceeded the numerical limit, he could only stand there speechless. Feng Zhou calmly picked up the broken head of the test golem and brought it in front of him. Since the blonde student had personally claimed that he would eat the golem if Feng Zhou broke it, Feng Zhou told him that he could eat it now. The blonde student stammered nervously, unable to answer. Seeing his fear, Feng Zhou added that if he did not want to eat it, that was fine too. However, his expression suddenly turned cold, and a terrifying pressure spread from him. With glowing purple eyes, he ordered the blonde student to disappear from his sight forever. The blonde student was frightened and immediately backed down. As he ran away from the field, he shouted that he would definitely make Feng Zhou pay next time. After the commotion ended, Bai Xiaochen hurried over to Feng Zhou with excitement. She said that he was far too strong and asked how he had cultivated, urging him to teach her quickly. Feng Zhou awkwardly replied that it was only normal meditation training. The teacher then approached Feng Zhou while clapping. He praised him, saying Feng Zhou had truly opened his eyes. Feng Zhou modestly replied that the teacher was flattering him. The teacher placed a hand on his shoulder and promised that he would definitely fight for Feng Zhou to receive a spot on the school's critically cultivated seed list. Meanwhile, inside the principal's office, the principal reviewed the awakening results. Out of 10,000 new students in the school, 9,103 had successfully awakened, while 897 had failed. The awakening success rate was approximately 91%. Among them, there were 85 rare professionals in total. The list included Earth Knight Zhao Yuan, Chanting Strings Bai Xiao Chen, Storm Mage Gu Shiqiu, Demon Hunter Ye Fan, and others. The principal considered these 85 students suitable for direct entry into the school's 100 critically cultivated seed spots. However, when he reached Fang Zhou's file, he paused. Looking at the record of Fang Zhou's necromancer profession, he dismissed it as a class with no future and decided it would be better to leave Fang Zhou out. Inside the principal's office, the principal heard someone knocking and called them inside. Teacher Lu entered in a hurry and immediately began searching through a stack of student documents. The principal was surprised to see him and asked why he was there instead of teaching the combat class. Teacher Lu explained that he had an urgent matter to report. After searching for a moment, Teacher Lu found Fang Zhou's file. Fang Zhou was a necromancer, and Teacher Lu strongly recommended adding him to the school's seed list. The principal admitted that the necromancer profession possessed great potential. However, its full strength was extremely difficult to develop. Although Major Su Xinian was also a necromancer whose combat power was no weaker than that of other mages, she had only reached that level because a former legendary expert had personally trained and supported her. The principal therefore wanted to know what made Fang Zhou worthy of receiving such valuable resources. The principal also knew that Teacher Lu and Fang Zhou's parents had once been comrades in arms. Fang Zhou's parents were respected Federation heroes, but the seed list was extremely important. Being selected did not only provide resources, it also came with great responsibility. Teacher Lu explained that this was precisely why he had come. He handed over Fang Zhou's meditation and combat class reports. Fang Zhou had mastered the skeleton meditation method during his very first meditation class. In actual combat, he had also managed to summon more than 20 skeletons. Teacher Lu firmly believed that Fang Zhou's talent could allow him to create an entirely new chapter in the history of necromancers. After hearing this, the principal became interested. However, he decided not to make an immediate judgment. He wanted to wait until the simulated battlefield opened and see Fang Zhou's performance for himself. As he looked at Fang Zhou's file, the principal quietly wondered what kind of unexpected abilities the young necromancer would reveal. As Fang Zhou walked across the school grounds with the silver-haired girl, she curiously asked how he had managed to summon so many skeletons during his very first combat class. Fang Zhou casually replied that he had only summoned a few more than usual and did not consider it a big deal. The girl pointed at him and warned that being overly humble could also be considered a form of arrogance. Fang Zhou laughed awkwardly and insisted that he genuinely did not think his achievement was anything impressive. However, Fang Zhou could not reveal the truth to her. The power he had displayed during the combat class was only a tiny fraction of his actual strength. Compared to what he was truly capable of, summoning those skeletons was merely a drop in the bucket. Just as Fang Zhou and the girl were about to leave, someone suddenly called out for him to wait. They turned around and saw a confident red-haired student approaching them. The student introduced himself as Ye Fan and proudly declared that he had never been weaker than anyone throughout his entire life. After observing everyone in Class 1, Ye Fan believed that Fang Zhou was the only student worthy of becoming his opponent. Fang Zhou and the silver-haired girl stared at him in awkward silence. Fang Zhou then calmly rejected the challenge, saying that he had no interest in accepting a challenge from someone behaving like a delusional fantasy character. The girl also found Ye Fan extremely strange. Without giving him another chance to speak, she and Fang Zhou turned around and continued walking away. Ye Fan hurried after them while repeatedly telling Fang Zhou to wait. Ye Fan quickly stopped Fang Zhou and explained that he was not asking for a simple challenge. Instead, he wanted Fang Zhou to become his regular sparring partner. Fang Zhou was slightly surprised and asked why Ye Fan needed one. Ye Fan explained that after awakening the rare Demon Hunter profession, he had joined the Demon Hunter Scientific Research Group. During the research process, he needed a sparring partner with strength equal to his own so the researchers could continue studying and developing his profession. However, Fang Zhou saw no reason to cooperate with someone else's research. Hearing this, Ye Fan immediately offered him 10 contribution points in exchange for 2 weeks of sparring. He also promised to provide accommodation and meals during that period. The moment Fang Zhou heard the offer, he accepted without hesitation and shook Ye Fan's hand, declaring that it was a pleasure doing business. Ye Fan smiled, pleased that the rival he had chosen had agreed so easily. He then told Fang Zhou to come with him immediately. The silver-haired girl stared at Fang Zhou in disbelief and asked how he could agree to such a strange person so quickly. Fang Zhou calmly explained that 10 contribution points were a considerable amount. He also believed that the people waiting for him at home probably needed those points. As they watched Ye Fan walk ahead, the girl remarked that he was probably a wealthy second-generation young master because of how generously he had offered the reward. Fang Zhou immediately rejected that idea. He had already realized that Ye Fan was not spending his own wealth at all. The Demon Hunter Research Association had advanced those contribution points to him for the research. The silver-haired girl agreed that the members of the Research Association were indeed generous. However, she pointed out that the contribution points were only in advance, which meant Ye Fan would eventually have to repay them. Considering how carelessly he spent resources, she believed he might still be paying off the debt 20 years after graduation. Fang Zhou finally understood why Ye Fan had offered the reward so easily. After walking for a while, Ye Fan stopped in front of a large modern building and urged them to enter. He led Fang Zhou and the silver-haired girl into a spacious laboratory filled with advanced machines, research equipment, mechanical models, and experimental devices. Ye Fan proudly introduced it as the laboratory belonging to his research group. Fang Zhou looked around and was impressed by how well equipped the facility was. He realized that rare professions received exceptionally generous treatment from the Federation. A green-haired researcher wearing glasses and a white laboratory coat approached them. One of his arms was mechanical. He greeted them and introduced himself as Chen Qingxuan, the person responsible for the Demon Hunter Research Association. He was also a silver-level Gale Ranger. Fang Zhou politely greeted Professor Chen. However, while observing him, Fang Zhou immediately sensed something unusual. Even though Chen Qingxuan worked as a logistics researcher, Fang Zhou could feel the powerful aura of countless frontline battles surrounding him. Professor Chen explained that a senior human demon hunter had recently achieved the legendary rank in the Abyss Mystic realm. That powerful expert had successfully slain an Abyss Lord, displaying extraordinary combat strength. Because of that achievement, Huasha Military Academy had placed great importance on Ye Fan after he awakened the demon hunter profession. The academy had established a special scientific research group to study him and fully develop the potential of his rare profession. Professor Chen then turned toward Fang Zhou and revealed that he had already reviewed his files as well. He offered to establish a small research association specifically for Fang Zhou if he was interested. However, Fang Zhou awkwardly rejected the offer. After learning that the resources provided by such associations were only advances that had to be repaid, he had no desire to remain in debt for 20 years after graduating. Professor Chen did not force him and instead suggested beginning the actual combat research. He led Fang Zhou and Ye Fan into a large underground combat arena. The research team had already prepared detailed safety measures, allowing both of them to fight freely without worrying about placing their lives in danger. To help them display their full combat power, Professor Chen allowed each of them to select 3 pieces of combat equipment from the armory. As Fang Zhou observed Ye Fan preparing himself, he quietly evaluated his opponent. Ye Fan was clearly not weak. His great speed and powerful burst damage could prove highly effective against Fang Zhou's summoned skeletons, making him a troublesome opponent in close combat. As Fang Zhou prepared for the battle, he decided that it was time to use skill deduction to increase his combat power. A glowing green interface appeared before him, displaying his Necromancer abilities. Among them were Summoned Skeleton, Level 2 Bone Javelin, and Level 1 Bone Shield. Fang Zhou focused on strengthening his skills before facing Ye Fan. Meanwhile, Ye Fan removed his leather jacket and equipped a massive bladed bow along with protective shoulder armor. He confidently revealed that he had recently mastered the weapon mastery skill for the bladed bow. With his new ability, he believed that Fang Zhou would still be no match for him, even if Fang Zhou summoned 20 skeletons. Fang Zhou merely smiled at Ye Fan's confidence. That might have been true before, but after adding points to his skills, the result might be completely different. His status showed that he was a lower-level apprentice necromancer. His strength was 1.5, agility was 1.3, constitution was 1.3, and spirit was 2.5. He possessed the skeleton meditation method, Summon Skeleton, Bone Javelin, and Bone Shield. His bone javelin had already reached the mastered level, while bone shield had reached the proficient level. Fang Zhou then selected an apprentice staff and an apprentice robe from the armory. Both were ordinary gray-grade equipment produced through assembly lines. The staff slightly increased the effects of his spells, while the robe slightly reduced the damage he received. At the Demon Hunter Research Association, Ye Fan stood confidently before Fang Zhou while holding his enormous weapon. He praised Fang Zhou for displaying the confidence expected of his rival, admitting that it was truly impressive. However, Ye Fan had no intention of losing. Green energy suddenly erupted around his body as he leapt into the air. Ye Fan declared that the enhancement given to him by the research group was far beyond anything Fang Zhou could imagine. Powerful waves of energy swirled around him as he prepared to attack. Fang Zhou remained calm below, gripping his staff and watching Ye Fan carefully. Several researchers observed the match from inside the laboratory. One of them asked who they believed would win. Another immediately chose Ye Fan, explaining that they had interacted with him many times during the week. One researcher added that Ye Fan possessed the most terrifying combat instincts he had ever witnessed. However, a green-haired researcher wearing glasses warned them that they were reaching a conclusion too quickly. At that moment, a tall, bearded man entered the laboratory. The researcher recognized him as Teacher Lu and asked why he had come. Teacher Lu explained that two outstanding students from his class were fighting each other. As their teacher, he naturally had to observe the match. The researcher was surprised and asked whether Teacher Lu truly believed Fang Zhou could defeat Ye Fan. Teacher Lu confidently confirmed that he did. The researcher then examined Fang Zhou's information. Although Fang Zhou could summon a large number of skeletons, he was still a mage with a physically fragile body. Furthermore, Ye Fan had comprehended an extremely powerful displacement skill only the previous day. The researcher believed that this new ability might give Teacher Lu an unexpected surprise. Hearing that, Teacher Lu's expression changed slightly as his interest in the battle grew. Ye Fan rushed toward Fang Zhou and swung his enormous weapon with great force. Fang Zhou reacted quickly and moved aside, narrowly avoiding the powerful strike. He immediately created more distance between them while carefully watching Ye Fan's movements. Fang Zhou understood that Ye Fan possessed extremely strong close combat abilities. Fighting him at close range would be dangerous, so Fang Zhou decided to remain as far away as possible. However, Ye Fan quickly noticed his strategy. Blue energy began crackling around his body and gathering around his weapon. With a confident expression, he warned Fang Zhou that simply maintaining distance would not be enough to keep him safe. Ye Fan then activated his skill, Demon Hunting Arrow. Several bright blue arrows of energy formed around him and shot across the battlefield toward Fang Zhou. The attacks covered a wide area, making it difficult for Fang Zhou to escape. Facing the incoming arrows, Fang Zhou remained calm. Green light flashed in his eyes as dark magical energy surrounded him. A glowing summoning circle appeared beneath his feet, and he raised his staff. Without hesitation, Fang Zhou activated his summoning magic. Several skeleton warriors emerged from the magic circles. Green flames burned in their eyes as they gathered around Fang Zhou. The blue energy arrows tore through Fang Zhou's skeleton warriors, piercing their bodies and shattering their bones. Ye Fan continued attacking without giving Fang Zhou any time to recover. He understood that Fang Zhou's greatest advantage was his ability to continuously summon skeletons, so he decided to interrupt the rhythm of his summoning. Several blue arrows struck the glowing magic circle beneath Fang Zhou. The unstable energy caused the summoning process to fail. Realizing that his spell had been interrupted, Fang Zhou immediately moved away. More arrows crashed into the ground around him, but he narrowly avoided every attack. Fang Zhou felt relieved, knowing that he had nearly been struck. However, he did not panic. He quickly placed one hand against the magic circle and activated his summoning skill again. Green magical energy surged across the battlefield as a new group of skeleton warriors appeared. Despite the blue arrows flying around them, the skeletons charged forward and used their bodies to block the attacks. Watching the battle from the observation room, the green-haired researcher praised the younger generation for being truly formidable. He was deeply impressed by Fang Zhou's performance and declared that even if Fang Zhou lost to Ye Fan, he would still approve Fang Zhou's selection for the seed list. Teacher Lu warned Old Chen not to celebrate too early. He knew Fang Zhou well and believed that the young man had not yet revealed everything. Fang Zhou possessed a calm and experienced temperament, so Teacher Lu refused to believe that he had entered such an important battle without preparing any hidden trump cards. As the skeleton warriors surrounded Ye Fan, Fang Zhou realized that he could no longer afford to hold back. He raised his staff above his head as powerful green energy erupted around his body. A large magic circle appeared beneath him, and he activated his summoning ability at full power. Dozens of skeleton warriors emerged from the glowing circles and rushed onto the battlefield. The researchers watching from above were completely stunned. Fang Zhou had only awakened a few days earlier, yet he had already improved his summoning skill enough to control 30 skeletons at once. Despite being surrounded, Ye Fan remained completely calm. Rather than feeling afraid, he looked excited. He praised Fang Zhou's strength and declared that only someone with such an ability was worthy of being his rival. Fang Zhou carefully observed him from a distance. Ye Fan's calm reaction made him suspicious. Even while surrounded by so many skeletons, Ye Fan showed no fear or panic. Fang Zhou became certain that Ye Fan still had another hidden ability prepared. At that moment, green light flashed across Ye Fan's eyes. He charged through the skeleton army at incredible speed and activated Fierce Strike. Powerful arcs of green energy swept across the battlefield as he swung his enormous weapon. One skeleton after another was struck and thrown through the air, their bones shattered beneath the overwhelming force of his attacks. Within moments, several skeleton warriors collapsed into a broken pile on the ground. After clearing a path through the army, Ye Fan quickly created some distance between himself and the remaining skeletons. He believed that the space between them was finally enough. Ye Fan suddenly activated Shadow Charge and transformed into a streak of green energy. In an instant he crossed the battlefield and appeared directly beside Fang Zhou. Watching from the observation room, Old Chen believed the battle was already over. In his opinion, a mage could never withstand Ye Fan's attack at such close range. Teacher Lu, however, remained silent and continued watching carefully. Ye Fan immediately swung his enormous weapon and unleashed Vengeance Fierce Strike. Powerful green energy erupted from the blade as it came crashing toward Fang Zhou. However, Fang Zhou remained completely calm. He quietly declared that Ye Fan had taken the bait. A massive skeletal barrier suddenly appeared between them as Fang Zhou activated Bone Shield. Ye Fan's weapon struck the shield with tremendous force, creating a violent explosion. The powerful impact stopped his attack and threw him backward. Ye Fan stared at the enormous shield in disbelief and wondered what kind of skill Fang Zhou had used. Old Chen was equally shocked. He recognized it as a new Necromancer skill, but he could hardly believe that Fang Zhou had comprehended such an ability on his own. After creating distance between them, Fang Zhou apologized to Ye Fan. He admitted that Ye Fan was much stronger than he had expected, so he had been forced to use a few tactics. The researchers soon realized that Fang Zhou's plan was even more deceptive than it first appeared. He had used an optical camouflage cloth to hide himself among his skeleton warriors, making it difficult for Ye Fan to identify his true location. Teacher Lu could not help admitting that Fang Zhou's tactics were extremely cunning. Fang Zhou had used an optical camouflage cloth to disguise himself among the skeletons. His body blended perfectly with the surrounding undead, making it almost impossible to distinguish him from the others. Ye Fan searched through the advancing skeleton army, but he could not locate Fang Zhou's real body. Frustrated, he shouted for Fang Zhou to come out. However, the skeletons continued closing in on him from every direction. Ye Fan quickly realized that the situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. If the battle continued like this, the endless skeletons would eventually wear him down and drag him to defeat. With no other choice, he decided to use his hidden move. Green and blue flames suddenly erupted from Ye Fan's eyes and surrounded his entire body. A powerful column of energy then shot upward, creating a violent shockwave that sent the nearby skeletons flying away. The researchers watching from the laboratory were stunned. They could not believe that Ye Fan had already learned such a powerful skill at his current level. Old Chen explained that although the skill had an extremely long cooldown, it possessed tremendous explosive power and could also help its user escape from a dangerous encirclement. Recognizing the technique, the researchers realized that Ye Fan was finally using his strongest move. Surrounded by blazing green energy, Ye Fan raised his enormous weapon above his head and activated Skyfall Strike. He then called out to Fang Zhou and prepared to unleash the devastating attack upon him. Ye Fan roared as he unleashed Skyfall Strike with all his strength. A massive sphere of green energy descended upon the skeleton army and exploded violently, sending skeletons flying in every direction. The hooded figure that Ye Fan believed to be Fang Zhou was caught directly in the attack. The enormous impact shattered the ground and filled the battlefield with smoke and debris. When the dust began to clear, Ye Fan stood over the fallen figure. He acknowledged that Fang Zhou was extremely strong, but declared that he also had his own pride and could not allow himself to lose. Believing the battle had ended, Ye Fan immediately asked the researchers to call the medical staff because he did not want Fang Zhou to suffer any serious injuries. However, when Ye Fan looked toward the observation room, he noticed that something was wrong. The researchers were staring at him in shock instead of celebrating his victory. Those were not the expressions they should have shown to the winner. Confused, Ye Fan looked down at the defeated figure again. The camouflage covering its face slowly disappeared, revealing that the body beneath the cloak was actually another skeleton. Ye Fan's eyes widened as he realized that it was not Fang Zhou. He finally understood Fang Zhou's true plan. Fang Zhou had not simply disguised himself as one of the skeletons. Instead, he had dressed a skeleton in the camouflage cloth and made it look like Fang Zhou pretending to be a skeleton. It was a reverse disguise hidden beneath another disguise. By the time Ye Fan discovered the truth, it was already too late. The remaining skeleton warriors had surrounded him and grabbed his arms and legs. Fang Zhou finally stepped out from among the skeleton warriors and calmly called Ye Fan's name. He thanked Ye Fan for allowing him to win the match. Realizing that he had no strength left to continue fighting, Ye Fan lowered his weapon and admitted defeat. The result was immediately announced, declaring Fang Zhou the winner. Ye Fan understood that the energy consumed by his final attack had been far greater than expected, leaving him completely exhausted. As Ye Fan struggled to remain standing, one of Fang Zhou's skeleton warriors moved forward and supported him. Although slightly embarrassed, Ye Fan quietly thanked Fang Zhou for helping him. Fang Zhou smiled and told Ye Fan not to worry about it, saying that he could consider it sympathy for the loser. Hearing that, Ye Fan immediately became angry and declared that failure was merely fuel that would make him stronger. He warned Fang Zhou to wait for the day when he would defeat him. Seeing how seriously Ye Fan had taken the comment, Fang Zhou quickly explained that he had only been joking and told him not to become so excited. Professor Chen then approached Fang Zhou. Although he was reluctant to admit it, he praised Fang Zhou's combat ability for greatly exceeding his expectations. He added that Fang Zhou's clever and efficient methods could allow him to become a tactical master in the future. Fang Zhou respectfully addressed him as Professor Chen, but he could not help feeling that the man's words did not sound like genuine praise. Teacher Lu then asked Fang Zhou about the shield spell he had used during the battle. He wanted to know whether Fang Zhou had comprehended the skill by himself. Fang Zhou confirmed that he had. He explained that while practicing his skeleton summoning ability, he had gained new insights and comprehended 2 additional skills. He named those abilities Bone Javelin and Bone Shield. Professor Chen and Teacher Lu were left speechless after learning that Fang Zhou had comprehended 2 new skills by himself. Teacher Lu suddenly struck Fang Zhou on the head and praised him for always finding new ways to surprise them. Fang Zhou crouched down in pain and asked his teacher to be gentler. Professor Chen then suggested that Brother King Shen use the professional equipment at the research facility to test Fang Zhou's new abilities. King Shen agreed and immediately arranged everything. However, Fang Zhou explained that his spiritual power had already reached its limit after the battle, so he was afraid he could not demonstrate both skills. Teacher Lu assured him that such a minor problem was nothing to worry about. A large box filled with spiritual power recovery potions was soon brought over. Seeing the large number of bottles, Teacher Lu jokingly asked whether they were serving draft beer. Fang Zhou picked up one of the bottles and drank the potion directly. He had never consumed recovery potions as casually as water before, and he found the refreshing sensation surprisingly pleasant. Once Fang Zhou's spiritual power had recovered, the researchers prepared a combat testing golem. Teacher Lu told Fang Zhou to attack it with his new ability just as he would during combat class. Fang Zhou calmly agreed. He then activated his newly created skill, Bone Flying Spear. Bones gathered together and formed a sharp spear covered in blue energy. With a wave of his hand, Fang Zhou launched it straight toward the golem. The bone spear struck the target with tremendous force. The testing device immediately displayed an attack score of 85. Professor Chen was amazed by the result. Such a high attack ability was already exceptional for a newly awakened student, and the fact that Fang Zhou had created the skill himself made it even more impressive. After recording the results, Teacher Lu told Fang Zhou to prepare for the next test. This time they would measure the defensive ability of his second skill. Fang Zhou agreed and readied himself to demonstrate Bone Shield. The combat golem charged directly toward Fang Zhou and threw a powerful punch. Fang Zhou immediately activated Bone Shield, creating a strong skeletal barrier in front of himself. The golem's fist crashed against the shield, but it failed to break through. The equipment measured the shield's defensive ability at 80. After recording the results, Teacher Lu explained that Fang Zhou's offensive power was comparable to that of a storm mage, while his defensive power was close to that of an earth knight. He proudly declared that Fang Zhou had truly been born to become a necromancer. Teacher Lu then began patting Fang Zhou's head again. Fang Zhou asked him to stop, wondering whether his teacher was secretly trying to lower his attributes by hitting him so often. Professor Chen approached Fang Zhou and praised the two skills he had created. Since both abilities were excellent, he suggested uploading them to the skill repository. Fang Zhou had heard of the skill repository before. It was a skill collection center established by the Federation. Awakened people could use contribution points to exchange for the skills stored inside. Professor Chen explained that the Research Institute had its own branch of the Federation's skill repository, allowing Fang Zhou to use it whenever necessary. Fang Zhou thanked him and accepted the offer. Teacher Lu then brought Fang Zhou to a pair of enormous doors. He explained that once Fang Zhou uploaded his new skills, he could use the contribution points he received to exchange for other abilities he needed. Fang Zhou thanked his teacher before pushing the doors open. However, the area beyond the entrance was completely dark. Fang Zhou became confused, wondering why a place called the Skill Repository looked nothing like a library. As he walked farther inside, he finally noticed a dimly lit library filled with towering bookshelves in the distance. Fang Zhou walked deeper into the enormous library and was amazed by the Federation's skill repository. Towering bookshelves filled the hall, and countless skills were stored within them. He quickly noticed that every skill he already knew could also be found there. He approached a device surrounded by glowing purple energy and uploaded the two abilities he had created. The system successfully recorded Bone Javelin and Bone Shield, rewarding him with 200 contribution points. Another notification then appeared. Since Fang Zhou was the original creator of those skills, he would receive 50% of the contribution points spent whenever someone else exchanged for them in the future. Fang Zhou was pleasantly surprised to learn that the skills could continue earning profits for him. Since entering the skill repository was a rare opportunity, Fang Zhou decided that exchanging for only a few ordinary skills before leaving would be a waste. He searched through the shelves and found a book called Skeleton Mutation Technique. Fang Zhou took the book and examined it as green energy surrounded his body. Rather than simply learning the skills stored inside the repository, he planned to use them as blueprints to deduce and create even more powerful abilities. At that moment, a notification appeared, informing Fang Zhou that he had 100 points of soul power available for skill deduction. Seeing this, he smiled confidently and prepared to begin creating new skills. Fang Zhou entered the skill repository and soon discovered an upgradable skill called Skeleton Meditation Method. A system message appeared in front of him, asking if he wanted to consume soul power to upgrade it. Fang Zhou did not hesitate and chose yes. The moment he confirmed it, a strong green aura of death surrounded him. The strange energy filled the area and made the atmosphere feel terrifying. Fang Zhou was shocked by how powerful the aura was. At that moment, a huge skeleton monarch appeared before him. It looked like an ancient undead king, wearing a crown and giving off frightening pressure. Its red eyes glowed brightly as it stared at Fang Zhou. Then the system announced that the skeleton meditation method had been improved successfully. After that, the skeleton monarch raised its hand and sent an ancient book toward Fang Zhou. Fang Zhou looked at the book and wondered if it was meant for him. He reached out and accepted it. As soon as Fang Zhou touched the book, strange symbols and green energy began spinning around him. The book opened by itself and countless glowing words surrounded his body. The powerful death aura became even stronger. The skeleton monarch stood behind him like a guardian, while Fang Zhou absorbed the upgraded skill. The entire space was filled with dark green energy, broken pages, and a terrifying undead presence. In the end, Fang Zhou successfully obtained the improved Skeleton Monarch meditation method. After Fang Zhou upgraded the skill, a system message appeared in front of him. It explained that the Skeleton Monarch meditation method was a modified version of the original skeleton meditation method. Compared to the original, it increased meditation speed by 100% and could also strengthen all undead-type skills. Fang Zhou became very satisfied. He thought that the skill not only increased his upgrade speed but also improved his skill intensity. Because of that, the soul power he had spent was not wasted. However, Fang Zhou also understood that no matter how powerful a skill was, it still needed enough spirit power to use it. He remembered that during his previous battle with Ye Fan, his spirit power had almost been exhausted. Just then, he realized that he still had a lot of contribution points. Since he could exchange them for a skill that increased spirit power, he decided to choose Presence of Mind. Fang Zhou spent 20 contribution points and successfully exchanged them for the skill. He looked at the skill and learned that Presence of Mind could passively increase the caster's spirit power recovery speed. When used actively, it could also restore a certain amount of spirit power. The only drawback was that the learning difficulty was very high, but Fang Zhou did not think it was a problem for him. At that moment, another system message appeared. It asked if he wanted to consume 10 points of soul power to quickly reach the entry stage of the skill. Fang Zhou chose yes without hesitation. Soon, blue energy and strange glowing symbols surrounded him. The book floated in his hand as the power entered his body. A moment later, the system announced that the skill Presence of Mind had successfully reached the entry stage. Fang Zhou checked the effect of his new skill and felt very pleased. His spirit power recovery speed had clearly improved and blue energy moved around his body. He thought that if he faced Ye Fan again, he could probably defeat him with a sea of skeletons. After that, Fang Zhou decided to exchange for a few more skills. He chose Vine Entanglement, Swamp Spell, Earth Wall Spell, Spider Web Spell, and Ray of Enfeeblement. He planned to use these skills as references for upgrading his own skills later. Fang Zhou spent 60 contribution points and successfully exchanged them for the skills. However, he knew that having skills alone was not enough. They also needed to be matched with equipment of the right strength. Since he was an F-grade lower apprentice, he could only use gray-white grade equipment. Because of that, Fang Zhou spent another 40 contribution points and exchanged them for equipment. He obtained an apprentice mage hat, a gray inferior item that could slightly increase the upper limit of spirit power. He also obtained an apprentice necklace, which could slightly increase spirit power recovery speed. Along with those, he received 2 apprentice rings which could slightly reduce skill cooldown time. After wearing the full mage apprentice equipment set, the system announced that his cultivation speed and skill proficiency improvement speed had increased by 10%. Fang Zhou smiled with satisfaction. He thought that this was not bad, because his upgrade speed could now become even faster. Fang Zhou looked at his current status after finishing his exchanges. His name was Fang Zhou, his profession was Necromancer, and his rank was Apprentice Lower. His attributes were Strength 1.5, Agility 1.3, Constitution 1.6, and Spirit 2.5. His status showed Soul Split. His equipment was the Mage Apprentice 4-piece set. His skills included Skeleton Meditation Method, Summon Skeleton, Bone Javelin, Bone Shield, and Presence of Mind. Fang Zhou felt that his harvest this time was not small. He thought the Federation's skill repository was truly extraordinary. Just then, his skeleton clone appeared in front of him. Fang Zhou suddenly remembered that the skeleton clone also needed skills that matched its strength. He decided to exchange for 3 skills for the skeleton clone: Weapon Mastery, Block, and Battle Cry. These 3 skills were useful for it. Fang Zhou spent another 30 contribution points and successfully exchanged them for the skills. Although the skill repository was great, Fang Zhou also felt that it was not very friendly when it came to contribution points. He wondered if he could find another good partner like Ye Fan in the future. Later, Fang Zhou left the skill repository and returned to the Demon Hunter Research Association. Someone asked him if he had learned any new skills. Fang Zhou replied that his harvest this time was huge. At that moment, Ye Fan suddenly refused to accept the situation. He threw a potion toward Fang Zhou and told him to drink it. He said he had not understood Fang Zhou's tactics before, but this time he would definitely defeat him as quickly as possible. Fang Zhou held the potion and calmly asked if Ye Fan was sure he wanted to challenge him right then because he had just upgraded his skills. Ye Fan refused to stay beneath Fang Zhou. He declared that he would use all of his strength to defeat him this time. Fang Zhou calmly said that this would count as extra practice, so Ye Fan would have to pay extra contribution points. The researcher agreed and said that as long as Ye Fan accepted it, Ye Fan would be the one who had to pay later. Fang Zhou then told Ye Fan to bring it on. He also said he would return the potion to him because Ye Fan might need it later. Ye Fan became angry after hearing this and shouted Fang Zhou's name. Without wasting any time, Ye Fan used his strongest move right at the beginning of the battle. A green vine-like attack rushed toward Fang Zhou with great speed. The people watching were shocked. One of them said that Yi Fan had used his ultimate move straight away. Another person said that Yi Fan's battle instinct was really good because a quick battle was his only way to win. Fang Zhou stayed calm as the attack came toward him. The onlookers wondered how he would respond after gaining new skills. Then Fang Zhou raised his hand and a large green magic circle appeared beneath him. Powerful green energy spread around him as he prepared to use his new spell against Yi Fan's attack. Bai Xiaochen watched Fang Zhou's magic circle and wondered if he was only summoning skeletons again. But Instructor Luo immediately realized something was wrong and said that the number of skeletons was completely different this time. Behind Fang Zhou, countless skeletons began rising from the green magic circle. They appeared one after another like a huge army. Seeing that massive number, everyone was shocked and could not believe their eyes. Then Ye Fan's powerful attack crashed into the skeleton army, creating a huge green explosion. Dust and smoke filled the battlefield. The observers were surprised and said that the power was even greater than before. They realized that Ye Fan had actually understood and upgraded his skill during the previous battle. Fang Zhou also admitted that Ye Fan's attack had become much stronger. However, he calmly said that his own skills had also become stronger, even if only a little. As the smoke cleared, Fang Zhou walked forward with a confident smile. Behind him, a massive army of skeletons stood together. Ye Fan was trapped among them and became nervous. Suddenly, one skeleton appeared close to Ye Fan's face. Ye Fan panicked and shouted that it should not hit his face. The skeletons then attacked and a loud impact rang out across the battlefield. After the battle ended, the researcher announced that the sparring session was over for the day. He said Ye Fan probably would not be able to train for a week because of how badly he had been beaten. Then the researcher asked Fang Zhou if he really had no plan to establish a Necromancer Research Association. Fang Zhou simply replied that he did not. However, he thought to himself that if he allowed them to research him and they discovered he had a system, it would become very troublesome. Meanwhile, inside the skill repository, a woman noticed something unusual. She saw that a necromancer had actually registered a new skill. She became surprised and wondered how a necromancer had managed to do that. Su Xinyan entered the skill repository and spent 20 contribution points to exchange for the newly discovered necromancer skills. As she read through Bone Javelin and Bone Shield, she was amazed. She realized that skeleton-type spells could be used in many creative ways and praised the person who had created the skills as a true genius. Excited by what she had discovered, Su Xinyan hurried to tell her father about the new skills. Meanwhile, Teacher Lu visited Principal Su Tiankuo's office once again. He earnestly requested that Fang Zhou be added to the seed list, and Professor Chen also stepped forward to support the recommendation. However, Principal Su Tiankuo was not convinced. He believed that even if a necromancer performed well now, the class would eventually fall behind because there were too few suitable skills available for it in the future. Teacher Lu quickly replied that Fang Zhou had already comprehended 2 necromancer skills on his own. Hearing this, the principal was so shocked that he almost spat out his tea. Even then, the principal remained doubtful. He argued that learning new skills alone meant nothing, and that the real question was whether those skills were actually powerful. At that moment, Su Xinyan entered the office and excitedly announced that 2 brand new necromancer skills had appeared in the skill repository. The principal was stunned and immediately asked if she was talking about necromancer skills. Su Xinyan nodded and demonstrated the skills she had just studied. Although she had not fully mastered them yet, she explained that their effects were already incredibly impressive. Su Xinyan excitedly asked her father if he knew who had created the new necromancer skills. Before he could answer, she declared that she wanted to accept that person as her master. Her father smiled helplessly and told her that it was impossible because the creator of those skills was still only a student. Su Xinyan was left speechless after hearing that. Meanwhile, Fang Zhou was quietly meditating in the classroom when Wu Zhexing suddenly rushed over and loudly challenged him to another fight. Fang Zhou looked at him calmly and asked how many times he had already lost. He told him to spend more time cultivating and improving himself instead of constantly asking for another battle. Wu Zhixing confidently replied that things were different this time. He proudly said that, with Bai Shaoshen's help, his strength had increased tremendously, and he was certain he could finally defeat Fang Zhou. Embarrassed, Bai Shaochen quickly explained that Wu Zhixing had begged her on his knees in public for help. She had only agreed because she wanted to avoid causing a misunderstanding. Curious, Fang Zhou asked how she had helped improve Wu Zhixing's strength. Bai Shaochen explained that a few days earlier, while sleeping, she had comprehended a powerful support skill called Lullaby. The skill greatly increased spirit power recovery and also improved the effects of meditation and training. Wu Zhixing added that the skill could only be used 3 times a day. To earn the chance to use it, he had spent 2 contribution points every week. Fang Zhou could not help wondering if the man planned to spend his entire life paying off his debts. Even so, Wu Zhixing remained full of confidence. He challenged Fang Zhou once again, insisting that this time he was certain he would win. Fang Zhou thought about Bai Shaochen's lullaby skill. Since it could improve the effects of meditation and training, he wondered if it would also work on his skeleton clone inside the undead realm. Without wasting any time, he asked Bai Shaochen if she would sell him the remaining uses of her lullaby skill. She hesitated for a moment before saying that it was possible. Wu Zhixing became annoyed because Fang Zhou was completely ignoring his challenge. Instead of accepting the duel, Fang Zhou summoned several skeletons and calmly told the red-haired student to fight them first. He also reminded him to transfer the promised contribution points after the battle. Furious, Wu Zhi complained that Fang Zhou was looking down on him, but he had no choice except to face the skeletons. Fang Zhou then politely asked Bai Shaochen to use Lullaby on him. She agreed and activated the skill. A soothing green aura and musical notes surrounded Fang Zhou as the support spell took effect. At the same time, inside the undead realm, the skeleton clone immediately sensed the change. It was pleased to discover that the effects of Lullaby could also influence it. Realizing this was a valuable opportunity, the clone decided to test how much the skill could improve its abilities. The clone checked its current status and prepared for the experiment. It summoned another skeleton warrior and decided to use it to measure the effects of the enhancement. The skeleton warrior charged forward with a heavy bone mace while the skeleton clone calmly drew a bone spear, preparing to test its improved combat strength under the effects of Lullaby. When the enemy skeleton swung its heavy mace, the clone calmly activated parry. It blocked the attack and greatly reduced the damage. The clone realized that the success of parry depended on its constitution and skill proficiency. Next, the clone activated weapon mastery and transformed its fighting stance. It smoothly redirected the enemy's attack before instantly launching a powerful counterattack with reverse thrust. The precise strike pierced through the enemy skeleton and defeated it with a single blow. As the defeated skeleton's energy was absorbed, the system rewarded the clone with increased attributes. Thanks to Lullaby, the rewards were boosted by 10%, granting strength plus 0.1 Athen and soul power plus 0.55. The skeleton clone was delighted by the result. It realized that Lullaby was an incredible support skill because it not only improved training but also increased the rewards gained from battles. Encouraged by its success, the clone spotted 2 more skeleton enemies rushing toward it. Without hesitation, it charged forward, swinging its weapon confidently as it prepared to continue testing its enhanced combat abilities. After defeating the 2 skeleton warriors, the skeleton clone absorbed their energy. Thanks to Lullaby, the system once again granted increased rewards, giving it additional strength and soul power. Looking ahead, the clone noticed that there was still an entire undead legion waiting in the distance. Instead of retreating, it became excited and decided to challenge all of them at once. The skeleton clone let out a loud battle cry and boldly shouted for the entire undead army to attack together. As its roar echoed across the battlefield, it activated the battle cry skill. The system explained that battle cry temporarily increased the user's 3 main attributes: strength, constitution, and agility. The duration of the effect and the amount of the boost depended on the user's strength attribute and skill proficiency. With its abilities greatly enhanced, the skeleton clone stood fearlessly before the advancing undead legion, ready to fight every enemy head-on. The skeleton clone charged fearlessly into the endless undead army. As it defeated skeleton after skeleton, it continuously absorbed their energy. Every victory granted it more strength and soul power, allowing it to grow stronger in the middle of the battle. The clone realized that it could still become even more powerful. It roared loudly and continued fighting without slowing down, enjoying the constant increase in its strength. Suddenly, something unusual happened. the skeleton clone noticed bones gathering together in the distance. It stopped for a moment and stared in surprise, wondering what was happening. The scattered bones quickly fused into a single giant figure. A powerful undead with glowing eyes, large bone wings, and a massive sword appeared before the clone. The creature was called the Bone Angel. The skeleton clone was shocked. It could not believe that such a powerful boss had spawned directly inside the beginner village. It immediately realized that the battle had become far more dangerous than before. The Bone Angel slowly raised its massive sword high into the air. Its overwhelming aura spread across the battlefield as it prepared to deliver a devastating attack. The skeleton clone immediately sensed the danger. It realized that if the Bone Angel's attack landed, it would die instantly. Since defending against such a powerful strike was impossible, it decided that its only chance of survival was to attack first. Without hesitation, the skeleton clone activated Battle Cry. A powerful roar echoed across the battlefield, boosting its physical abilities. It then charged forward and unleashed Bone Spear with all its strength. The attack struck the Bone Angel's body directly. At the same time, the skeleton clone followed up with shield-breaking stance, aiming to weaken the Bone Angel's defense. Not giving the boss any time to recover, the skeleton clone immediately chained another skill, Brutal Strike, and continued its relentless assault, determined to overwhelm the Bone Angel before it could launch its deadly attack. The skeleton clone suddenly changed direction and rushed past the Bone Angel instead of attacking it directly. It decisively targeted one of the Bone Angel's arms. The Bone Angel immediately swung its massive sword to counterattack. However, the skeleton clone activated parry at the perfect moment and blocked the attack, greatly reducing the damage. Even so, the impact was so powerful that it was thrown backward and coughed from the force. As the dust settled, the skeleton clone looked at the Bone Angel and realized its plan had worked. It was relieved that it had shattered one of the Bone Angel's arms beforehand. Otherwise, that powerful strike would have shattered all of its bones. The skeleton clone then noticed something even more important. By breaking one of the Bone Angel's arms, it had also exposed the boss's weakness. Confident that it had found a way to defeat its powerful opponent, it prepared for the next attack. Just then, the Bone Angel raised its sword and suddenly began spinning at incredible speed, creating a powerful tornado around itself. The skeleton clone's expression changed as it realized the danger. It immediately understood that the Bone Angel was using the centrifugal force from its spinning body to make up for the strength it had lost after losing one arm. The spinning attack was so powerful that it began tearing apart the entire mountain. The skeleton clone also realized that while the Bone Angel was spinning, there was no chance to target its exposed weakness. The Bone Angel then charged straight toward it again with unstoppable force. The skeleton clone could not help but think that the Bone Angel had an unbelievable desire to keep fighting. As the spinning attack rushed closer, the skeleton clone found itself trapped in a dead end with nowhere left to escape. Seeing no other option, it tightened its grip on its bone spear and decided to risk everything in one final clash. The skeleton clone realized that the powerful wind created by the Bone Angel's spinning sword was already strong enough to scrape away bone and tear flesh apart. Even so, it remained calm, focusing all of its attention on observing the spinning attack. After watching carefully, it finally spotted a tiny opening. Without wasting a second, the skeleton clone dashed forward at full speed and charged straight through the narrow gap. As it closed the distance, it thrust its bone spear toward the Bone Angel. The Bone Angel roared and tried to stop the attack, but the skeleton clone mocked it, joking that such a huge skeleton must have osteoporosis and should go eat more calcium. As the attack landed, the skeleton clone noticed that the blue soul fire core inside the Bone Angel's chest had been exposed. Realizing this was the opportunity it had been waiting for, it immediately cast Bone Javelin and launched the spear directly toward the glowing core. The Bone Angel reacted just in time and quickly folded one of its giant wings in front of its chest. The Bone Javelin pierced through the wing, but the wing absorbed most of the impact and protected the Soulfire core from being destroyed. Watching the result, the skeleton clone remained calm and thought to itself that its prediction had been correct. The Bone Angel's wings were not just for decoration, they could also protect its most important weakness. However, it smiled to itself because its deduction system was not just for show either. The system quickly completed the fusion and successfully created a new undead skill called Bone Shackles. The skill could condense undead mana into strong bone chains that would bind enemies, making it difficult for them to move or fight. The strength, duration, and range of the chains depended on the user's spirit attribute and skill proficiency. Satisfied with the result, the skeleton clone confirmed that its deduction had been correct. It realized that the deduction system could combine the characteristics of different skills and turn them into even stronger undead abilities. Looking at the bone angel flying in the air, the skeleton clone calmly said that since its opponent liked flying so much, it would bring it back down. It immediately activated bone shackles. Blue bone chains shot through the air and wrapped tightly around the bone angel's body, locking its movements. With the enemy successfully restrained, the skeleton clone pulled the chains with all its strength and commanded the bone angel to come crashing down to the ground. The skeleton clone calmly warned the bone angel not to struggle. It explained that the more the bone angel resisted, the more excited it became. With a powerful pull, the skeleton clone slammed the bone angel into the ground with tremendous force. The impact shook the battlefield and caused a huge explosion of dust and debris. As the bone angel lay defeated, its blue soul fire slowly drifted out of its body. The skeleton clone gladly accepted the soul fire and absorbed it into itself. Immediately, the system notified it that it had gained 100 soul power. Although it was pleased with the reward, the skeleton clone was confused because its body had not become any stronger. The system then explained that its basic attributes had already reached the limit of its current race. It could no longer increase its attributes unless it used soul power to begin a race evolution. The skeleton clone finally understood why it had stopped growing stronger. Looking toward the sky, it wondered what existed beyond its current limits and decided that it wanted to find out. A new system prompt appeared, showing that its current race was apprentice-level skeleton. It also displayed an evolution path to Iron-level skeleton warrior, which required 100 soul power to begin. Without any hesitation, the skeleton clone selected yes. It declared that its path of evolution had officially begun. Dark energy immediately surrounded its body as the system announced that Skeleton Fang Zhou's race evolution had begun. As the evolution continued, a voice echoed in the skeleton clone's mind, declaring that the path of death was the path of slaughter, and the path of slaughter was the path of evolution. The skeleton clone groaned as its body transformed. Moments later, the system announced that its evolution into a bone warrior had been successfully completed. The system then displayed another notification showing that all of its base attributes had increased by 30 points, including strength, constitution, agility, and spirit. The skeleton clone was pleasantly surprised to discover that evolution had also unlocked a new racial talent called Bone Monarch. After reading the talent's description, it learned that only the strongest skeletons could obtain this blessing. The talent increased the damage it dealt to skeleton-type undead while slightly reducing the damage it received from them. The skeleton clone smiled, realizing that this ability was specially designed for fighting skeleton monsters. It knew this would allow it to level up much faster inside the undead realm. Just then, an ordinary skeleton quietly sneaked up behind it and swung a bone club at its head. The skeleton clone barely reacted and simply glanced back in confusion. The attack landed directly on its skull, but it caused almost no damage. The skeleton clone calmly remarked that the damage had been greatly reduced. At this rate, it would not even need to defend itself against the weakest skeletons. After evolving, the skeleton clone noticed another notification from the system. It explained that because its race had evolved, its skeletal armament could also be upgraded. Without hesitation, it chose to upgrade it. A moment later, the upgrade was complete, and the system unlocked a new piece of equipment called bone armor. The bone armor immediately fused with the skeleton clone's body. The system explained that it was a white-grade armor created from bone essence that slightly increased the user's overall defense. Feeling the changes, the skeleton clone smiled and admitted that its strength had increased by a great deal. Wanting to test its new abilities, it looked at a nearby skeleton and apologized in advance, saying that it would use it for some practice. The confused skeleton made strange noises, but before it could react, the skeleton clone rushed toward it at incredible speed. The skeleton was so shocked that it could only stare in confusion. The skeleton clone's punch struck the skeleton with overwhelming force, instantly smashing its entire body into pieces. Looking at the scattered bones, the skeleton clone calmly apologized again, saying that it had only been warming up with the first punch. It then realized that, when combined with the bone armor, its damage against skeleton-type enemies had increased dramatically. After defeating the skeleton clone received only a tiny increase in strength and soul power. It realized that defeating weak skeletons no longer helped it grow very much. Looking into the distance, it decided that if it wanted to become stronger, it would have to venture into the deeper regions of the undead realm, where more powerful monsters lived. Just then, the skeleton clone suddenly realized something was wrong. The battle with the boss had taken far longer than expected. At the same time, in the real world, Fang Zhou suddenly opened his eyes and gasped for breath. His face showed signs of pain, and Bai Xiaochen quickly rushed over to support him. Worried, she asked if he had been injured while meditating. Fang Zhou immediately understood that the injury his skeleton clone had suffered during the boss battle had affected his main body as well. He silently reminded himself that he could not afford to be so careless again. Not wanting Bai Xiaochen to worry, Fang Zhou calmly told her that he was fine and that he had simply run into a small problem while meditating. Before Bai Xiaochen could say anything else, someone suddenly called Fang Zhou's name. Turning around, Fang Zhou saw Ye Fan standing nearby. Ye Fan had broken free from the skeletons that had been restraining him. Breathing heavily, he stared at Fang Zhou and declared that those summoned skeletons could no longer hold him back. Ye Fan angrily challenged Fang Zhou to fight him fairly without relying on his summoned skeletons. Fang Zhou remained calm. He simply raised his hand and activated his newly created skill, Bone Shackles. Countless bone chains shot through the air and instantly wrapped around Ye Fan's arms, legs and body, stopping him in mid-air. Yi Fan struggled desperately and shouted that it was unfair because Fang Zhou was using a skill he had never seen before. He demanded another chance to fight. Fang Zhou ignored his complaints. He casually told Ye Fan to come back after he had earned enough contribution points to learn the skill himself. The students watching were stunned. None of them had ever seen the Bone Shackles skill before. They wondered if Fang Zhou had created a completely new skill by himself. Meanwhile, Ye Fan continued struggling inside the chains and shouted for someone to help free him. Watching everything from the side, Bai Xiaochen became even more curious. She quietly wondered just how powerful Fang Zhou really was. After leaving the training room, Fang Zhou checked the date on his phone and realized it was already Friday. He thought that he had been so focused on becoming stronger that he had not gone home in a long time. With that in mind, Fang Zhou headed to the Resource Exchange Department. He approached the staff member at the counter and politely asked to exchange 100,000 Longsha currency for contribution points. After exchanging his contribution points, the teacher reminded Fang Zhou that contribution points were difficult to earn and asked if he was sure he wanted to trade them for money. Fang Zhou calmly replied that it was fine because he urgently needed the money. The teacher completed the exchange, handed him a briefcase full of cash, and told him to come back if he ever needed another exchange. Fang Zhou thanked the teacher and left with the money. Looking at the briefcase, he smiled and thought that with this money, the people he cared about would be able to live a better life. Soon, Fang Zhou arrived at Yonduo Orphanage. The children were happily running around the yard while Sister Ruru reminded them to be careful and not fall. Watching them play, she smiled and thought that the children were full of energy. She quietly wondered how many of them would successfully awaken in the future. Just then, a child called out to Sister Ruru. She turned around and was surprised to see Fang Zhou standing there with a briefcase in one hand and a bag of food in the other. Fang Zhou smiled and greeted her, saying that he was finally back. The children immediately rushed toward him with excitement. They happily shouted that Brother Zhou had returned and eagerly asked if he had brought them anything delicious. Sister Ruru gently scolded them for asking about food the moment Fang Zhou arrived. Fang Zhou laughed and reassured everyone that there was enough food for all of them. After the children calmed down, Sister Ruru looked at Fang Zhou and quietly asked about the awakening test at his school. She wanted to know what his result had been. Fang Zhou smiled and told Sister Ruru that his awakening had been successful and that he had become a necromancer. Hearing that, Sister Ruru happily congratulated him. She said that as long as he had awakened successfully, that was all that mattered. When the children heard that Fang Zhou was a necromancer, they became excited instead of scared. Some thought skeletons were cool and wished they could summon skeletons too. Seeing how interested they were, Fang Zhou summoned 2 small weakened skeletons for them to play with. The children immediately gathered around them, laughing and playing games with the tiny skeletons. The little skeletons happily entertained the children, making everyone smile. After that, Fang Zhou handed the briefcase to Sister Ruru and told her that it was for the orphanage director. Surprised, Sister Ruru asked what was inside the briefcase. Before Fang Zhou could answer, a mocking voice suddenly interrupted them, sarcastically calling it a touching scene. Fang Zhou and Sister Ruru turned toward the voice. A large man wearing a gold chain walked into the orphanage with several men behind him. He smirked and coldly asked if his appearance had disturbed them. Sister Raru angrily confronted the men and asked why they had come. She reminded them that they had already agreed to repay the money in a couple of days. However, the leader of the group mocked her words and demanded that the money be paid immediately. The man suddenly shoved Sister Ruru to the ground and angrily declared that she had dared to delay the money owed to their Tiger Claw gang. He warned her that today was the final deadline. If they failed to pay the debt, the orphanage land that had been used as collateral would belong to the Tiger Claw gang. The gang leader laughed arrogantly while Sister Ruru remained worried. A little girl named Xing saw what was happening and became angry. She rushed toward the man, declaring herself the world's #1 troublemaker and telling the bad guys that they were not allowed to bully Sister Ruru. The gang leader became furious when Xing attacked him. He cursed at the little girl and raised his leg to kick her away. Sister Ruru panicked and shouted Xing's name, afraid that she would get hurt. However, before the man's kick could reach Xing, one of Fang Zhou's summoned skeletons suddenly rushed forward. The skeleton moved directly between Xing and the gang leader, protecting the little girl from his attack. The gang leader was shocked when the skeleton suddenly appeared and blocked his attack. He stumbled backward, unable to understand what he was seeing. Xing immediately recognized the skeleton as Fang Zhou's summoned creature. Fang Zhou walked over and stood protectively beside Xing. He calmly warned the men to apologize or face the consequences. Xing happily called out to Brother Zhou after seeing him. One of the gang members quickly recognized Fang Zhou's ability and whispered to his leader that the young man was a necromancer. However, the gang leader was not impressed. He believed necromancer was a weak profession and decided to show Fang Zhou the difference between them. As a professional martial artist, he confidently prepared to fight and thought it would not take much effort to defeat Fang Zhou. Fang Zhou remained calm and asked Sister Ruru who these people actually were. Sister Ruru explained that they were from the Tiger Claw Training Equipment Company. The children at the orphanage were at the perfect age to begin training, so the director had taken out a loan to buy training equipment in advance because he did not want to delay their training. However, Sister Ruru explained that the company was only pretending to be a normal business selling professional training equipment. In reality, the Tiger Claw gang was running an illegal loan shark business. The situation had become even worse because the interest kept increasing on top of the previous interest. Because of this, the orphanage's funds were nowhere near enough to repay the debt. After hearing everything, Fang Zhou became upset and asked Sister Ruru why she had not told him about such a serious problem earlier. The gang leader interrupted them and warned Fang Zhou not to interfere in other people's business. He looked down on Fang Zhou and confidently claimed that a young man like him could never afford the 100,000 Longsha currency needed to settle the debt. Fang Zhou suddenly threw the briefcase toward the gang leader and told him to catch it. He calmly explained that the case contained 100,000 Longsha currency and told them to leave after taking the money. Sister Ruru was shocked and immediately asked Fang Zhou where he had gotten so much money. The gang members opened the briefcase and were stunned to discover that it really contained 100,000. However, instead of leaving, the gang leader angrily told his men to shut up and threw the briefcase aside. The gang leader remembered that his boss had specifically ordered him to obtain the orphanage's land. Compared to the value of the land, 100,000 was nothing. He mocked Fang Zhou and asked whether he really thought such a small amount of money would solve everything. Fang Zhou calmly reminded him that the debt had already been repaid and asked what else he wanted. The gang leader immediately made another excuse. He claimed that because the orphanage had delayed the payment for so long, Fang Zhou now needed to pay them 500,000 Longsha currency. Sister Ruru was furious when she heard the ridiculous amount. However, Fang Zhou quickly understood what was happening. He realized that these men had never come simply to collect the debt. Their real purpose was to cause trouble and take the orphanage's land. The gang leader openly admitted that they wanted the land. He arrogantly questioned whether a bunch of bastards deserved to occupy such valuable property. He then ordered his men to charge forward, declaring that the Tiger Claw gang would take the land that day no matter what. His two companions became excited and immediately rushed toward Fang Zhou, ready to fight. Fang Zhou watched the gang members rushing toward him and smiled calmly. Since they wanted to fight him with numbers, he decided to respond in the same way. He activated Summon Skeleton, causing green necromantic energy to spread around the area. Several skeletons immediately appeared in front of the gang members. Fang Zhou ordered everyone to kneel down and apologize, warning them that otherwise they would have to face the consequences. The blonde gang member became nervous when a skeleton approached him, but he tried to remain confident. He believed there was nothing special about Fang Zhou's summons. In his opinion, necromancers were one of the weakest professions, and even ordinary people could easily destroy skeletons summoned by a rookie student. The gang leader confidently attacked one of the skeletons, believing he could easily smash it apart. He then ordered his men to drive everyone out of the orphanage. The other gang members charged forward as well, mocking the children for dreaming of becoming professionals. Seeing the violent men rushing around the orphanage frightened the children. Xing began crying and desperately called for someone to save them. Fang Zhou immediately became furious when he saw the children being threatened. He warned the gang members that they were courting death. Without hesitation, he commanded his summoned skeletons to scatter, preparing them to deal with the gang members attacking the orphanage. The gang members surrounded Fang Zhou's skeletons and laughed confidently. They believed the weak-looking skeletons could never stop them. One of them raised a spiked club and charged toward a skeleton, shouting for the others to show Fang Zhou what they were capable of. The man swung his weapon with all his strength, intending to destroy the skeleton in one strike. However, the skeleton's eyes suddenly glowed brightly. Before the attacker could react, the skeleton moved at incredible speed and counterattacked. It knocked the weapon out of his hand and sent him flying away. The man screamed in pain, shocked by the skeleton's overwhelming strength. The other gang members were equally stunned. They could not understand how skeletons summoned by a student could be so powerful. Even the gang leader became nervous. He looked at Fang Zhou and wondered why the skeletons summoned by a mere student were so strong. However, he still refused to believe that a simple necromancer could defeat him. The gang leader grabbed his weapon and charged directly toward Fang Zhou. Confident in his own strength, he unleashed his bone-shattering strike, intending to defeat Fang Zhou with a single powerful attack. Seeing the attack coming, Raru panicked and shouted for Fang Zhou to dodge quickly. However, Fang Zhou remained completely calm. Instead of moving away, he activated Bone Shield. A large shield made of bones instantly appeared in front of Fang Zhou. The gang leader's powerful bone-shattering strike crashed directly into the bone shield, creating a huge impact, but Fang Zhou successfully blocked the attack. The gang leader was completely shocked when Fang Zhou's bone shield successfully blocked his powerful attack. Before he could understand what had happened, Fang Zhou immediately activated bone shackles. Glowing bone chains suddenly appeared and wrapped tightly around the gang leader's entire body. He was lifted and violently slammed into the ground. The impact left him coughing in pain, but he was still furious. Unable to break free from the chains, he cursed Fang Zhou and threatened to kill him. At that moment, several skeletons quickly surrounded the trapped gang leader. Their weapons closed in around him from every direction, leaving him with nowhere to escape. Fang Zhou stood in front of him with a terrifying aura surrounding his body. He coldly ordered the gang leader to kneel and apologize. If he refused, Fang Zhou made it clear that he would die. Zhou Fang coldly told Lu Hu and his men to take the money and disappear from his sight. After witnessing Zhou Fang's strength and seeing the skeleton warriors standing behind them, Lu Hu knew that continuing the fight would only make things worse. He quickly ordered his men to leave. The group immediately ran out of the orphanage without daring to cause any more trouble. As they escaped, one of Lu Hu's men was still unwilling to accept what had happened. He asked Brother Hu if they were really going to let the matter end like this. Liu Hu angrily replied that there was nothing they could do right now. They were clearly no match for Zhou Fang. However, he had no intention of giving up on the orphanage. He secretly decided that once Zhou Fang left, they would make another move and find a way to take the place. Meanwhile, back at the orphanage, Ruru looked at Zhou Fang with surprise and asked how he had become so strong. Zhou Fang casually explained that the profession he had awakened was naturally quite powerful. The children gathered excitedly around him. They praised Brother Zhou for defeating all the bad guys by himself and happily called him their hero. Seeing their excitement, Zhou Fang gently patted one of the children on the head. He encouraged them to train hard in the future so that one day they could become as strong as him. The children happily agreed. After spending some time with them, Zhou Fang turned toward Ruru and asked her to take him to see Grandma Yun. As they walked through the orphanage, Zhou Fang asked whether something was wrong with Grandma Yun's health again. Ruru explained that Grandma Yun was getting older and had always suffered from several health problems. She had worked extremely hard when she was younger to raise all of them, so the problems she developed back then were difficult to completely recover from. However, Ruru believed that Grandma Yun would be very happy when she saw how successful and strong Zhou Fang had become. Zhou Fang quietly agreed, and the two soon arrived at Grandma Yun's room. When they entered, Grandma Yun was resting on the bed. Seeing Zhou Fang, she immediately recognized him and happily asked if Xiaozhou had returned. Zhou Fang approached her and told her that everything was going very smoothly for him at Haicheng High School. Zhou Fang explained to Grandma Yun that he had some free time during his school break, so he decided to come back and visit her and the children. Grandma Yun was happy that he had returned, but when she noticed all the things he had brought with him, she became curious and asked why he had bought so much. Ruru then happily explained that Xiaozhou had truly grown up. Not only had he returned to visit them, but he had also helped the orphanage pay off the debt they owed for the training equipment. Grandma Yun was shocked when she heard this. She knew Zhou Fang was still studying at school, so she could not understand where he had gotten so much money. Worried that he might have borrowed it, she immediately questioned him. Zhou Fang quickly reassured her that there was nothing to worry about. He told her that he had earned all the money himself. He explained that he had a very generous classmate at school. By simply becoming that classmate's sparring partner, Zhou Fang was able to earn quite a lot of contribution points. Hearing this, Grandma Yun finally felt relieved. She believed that now that Zhou Fang had become a professional, he would definitely have a bright future ahead of him. However, Grandma Yun suddenly began coughing heavily. Seeing this, Zhou Fang immediately became worried and asked if she was all right. Grandma Yun calmly waved her hand and told him not to worry. She explained that it was an old health problem and that she would be fine after getting some rest. Instead of worrying about her, she told Zhou Fang that he should focus on his upcoming midterm exam. Zhou Fang was surprised and asked how she even knew that he had a midterm exam coming up. Grandma Yun smiled and reminded him that his older sister, Wenru, had attended the same school several years before him. Because of that, she already knew about the school's schedule. Hearing this, Zhou Fang suddenly remembered that Sister Wenru was a few years older than him. She had already graduated from the school and had entered the frontline battlefield. Before leaving, Grandma Yun told Zhou Fang to rest properly at home and prepare well for his midterm exam. She believed that his results this time would definitely be much better than when Wenru was still studying there. Zhou Fang nodded and promised that he would work hard. After leaving Grandma Yun's room, Zhou Fang found Ruru and offered her 20 contribution points. Ro was immediately surprised. She felt that 20 contribution points were far too valuable and hesitated to accept them. However, Zhou Fang explained that he would not be able to return to the orphanage very often. Giving her these contribution points was the best way for him to help Grandma Yun and the children while he was away. After hearing his reason, Ruru finally agreed to accept them. She then took Zhou Fang to Wenru's old room. Since Wenru was no longer living there, Ruru told him that he could stay in the room for the time being. Zhou Fang agreed and entered the room. Before leaving, Ruru told him that if he wanted to eat anything, he could simply tell her. She would prepare whatever he wanted. Zhou Fang told her not to worry about him. He could manage on his own and would take care of himself. After Ruru left, Zhou Fang quietly looked around the room. He soon noticed a framed photograph and picked it up. Looking at the picture, he realized that this was the room Sister Wenru had once lived in. He wondered how she was doing now that she was fighting on the front line. However, Zhou Fang quickly pushed those thoughts aside. The battles on the front line were still far beyond his current level, so worrying about them would not help him. For now, he had something much more important to focus on. Zhou Fang knew that he needed to get good grades on the upcoming midterm exam. If he performed well and became stronger, he would be able to help Grandma Yun, Ruru, and the other children even more. With that goal in mind, Zhou Fang sat down on the bed and prepared to continue his training. He concentrated his mind and immediately called upon his system, ordering it to take him into the undead realm. After activating the system, Zhou Fang once again entered the undead realm. He appeared in the dark wasteland beneath the strange red sky and continued moving deeper into the area. However, Zhou Fang soon realized that the undead creatures around the outskirts of the wasteland could no longer help him increase his strength. They had become too weak for his current level. Because of this, he decided to travel farther into the wasteland. He was curious about what kinds of stronger monsters he might encounter deeper inside. As Zhou Fang continued forward, he suddenly heard movement nearby. When he looked ahead, he saw two new undead creatures. One was a skeleton warrior, carrying a sword and round shield, while the other was a skeleton archer holding a bow. Zhou Fang carefully observed them. Their equipment looked stronger than that of the skeletons he had fought before, but everything else seemed almost the same. Without wasting any time, the skeleton archer immediately attacked. It fired an arrow toward Zhou Fang while the skeleton warrior moved forward with its shield ready. Zhou Fang quickly blocked the incoming attack. After exchanging attacks with them, Zhou Fang realized something unexpected. Even though these undead creatures lived deeper inside the wasteland, their strength was not as impressive as he had expected. However, just as he began to underestimate them, the skeletons suddenly changed their movements. Zhou Fang immediately noticed that their intelligence seemed to have increased. Unlike the weaker undead from the outskirts, these two already understood how to cooperate with each other. The skeleton warrior stayed in front and protected its companion with its shield, while the skeleton archer remained behind and attacked Zhou Fang from a distance. After understanding their strategy, Zhou Fang decided that the ranged attacker needed to be eliminated first. Powerful energy immediately gathered around him as he locked his attention on the skeleton archer. Without hesitation, Zhou Fang charged directly toward it, planning to take down the ranged skeleton before dealing with the warrior. However, just as his attack was about to land, his weapon passed directly through the skeleton archer's body. Zhou Fang was surprised and immediately realized that what he had attacked was only an afterimage. At the same time, the real skeleton archer appeared at another position and quickly aimed its bow at him. Seeing this, Zhou Fang realized that these undead creatures had not only become more intelligent, but they were also capable of using skills. Meanwhile, the skeleton warrior surrounded itself with green energy and activated a defensive skill. With its shield covered in that energy, it rushed directly toward Zhou Fang and slammed its shield into him. However, Zhou Fang reacted quickly. He activated Afterimage Strike and moved at high speed, launching a powerful counterattack. At the same time, the skeleton archer fired several green arrows toward him. After defeating one of the undead, Zhou Fang absorbed its power. His constitution increased by Budeng 3, while his soul power also increased by Budeng 3. Zhou Fang raised his shield and blocked the incoming arrows. The attacks struck his defense one after another, releasing bursts of green energy, but he managed to withstand them. Without wasting any time, Zhou Fang gathered power into his weapon and activated Bone Javelin. A powerful blue-green bone javelin shot forward at incredible speed and struck the skeleton archer directly. The impact shattered its body into pieces, killing it instantly. As the skeleton archer was defeated, Zhou Fang absorbed its soul flame. His agility increased by 0.3, while his soul power also increased by 0.3. After finally dealing with the enemies, Zhou Fang let out a sigh of relief. Looking deeper into the undead wasteland, his expression became serious. He had only traveled this far and had already encountered undead creatures that could use skills and cooperate with each other. Zhou Fang realized that the deeper areas of the undead wasteland were far more dangerous than he had originally imagined. 1 week later, Zhou Fang was still training deep inside the undead wasteland. By this point, he had gone much farther into the dangerous region and was constantly surrounded by powerful undead energy. Soon, Zhou Fang encountered another powerful undead mage. The skeletal mage raised its staff and gathered a huge amount of green energy around itself before launching several magical attacks toward him. Zhou Fang immediately charged forward. The undead mage fired multiple green energy blasts at him, but Zhou Fang avoided the attacks and continued closing the distance. As soon as he found an opening, Zhou Fang rushed directly toward the enemy. However, the undead mage reacted quickly and prepared another powerful attack. Zhou Fang activated Afterimage Strike. His speed suddenly increased, leaving an afterimage behind and allowing him to avoid the enemy's attack. He then appeared from another direction and struck back before the undead mage could react. After defeating the enemy, Zhou Fang absorbed its power. His constitution increased by 0.3, while his soul power increased by another 0.3. But Zhou Fang had no time to relax. Another group of undead immediately attacked him. Seeing the incoming attack, he quickly activated Bone Shield. A large defensive barrier appeared around him and blocked the powerful strike. Zhou Fang then prepared his counterattack. He activated Bone Shackles, causing countless dark chains to appear around the enemies. The chains quickly wrapped around the undead monsters, completely restricting their movements and preventing them from escaping. Zhou Fang raised his weapon and attacked one of the restrained undead, intending to send it straight to hell. However, the enemy managed to block his strike, surprising him. Zhou Fang quickly realized that these undead monsters were becoming more troublesome. Their bodies were much stronger than those of the enemies he had fought before, and they were even capable of working together in groups of 4. Before he could finish them, another large skeleton warrior charged toward him with a shield. It slammed into Zhou Fang with tremendous force, leaving him almost no chance to fight back directly. At the same time, the undead that had been trapped by bone shackles managed to break free from the chains. Zhou Fang immediately understood that the enemies in this deeper area were far stronger than before. Several undead warriors then surrounded him and attacked together. Zhou Fang activated bone armor to protect himself, but their continuous attacks were so powerful that even his armor struggled to withstand them. Realizing that defending like this would eventually get him overwhelmed, Zhou Fang watched as another heavily armored skeleton prepared to charge. The monster activated Meat Shield Charge and rushed toward him with its shield raised. Zhou Fang quickly avoided the charging enemy and created some distance. He knew that his current attacks were no longer strong enough to easily break through the defenses of these undead monsters. Looking at his weapon, Zhou Fang realized that what he needed most right now was a stronger offensive skill, something powerful enough to break through their defenses. Realizing that he needed more attack power, Zhou Fang immediately asked the system to upgrade his bone javelin skill. The system detected that he had collected enough skill materials to perfect bone javelin. The upgrade would consume 10 points of soul power. Zhou Fang accepted without hesitation, and the system successfully perfected the skill. His bone javelin reached the mastered level. The upgraded skill could create bone javelins and launch them at enemies. More importantly, each javelin now dealt 3 different types of damage: armor-piercing physical damage, corrosive poison damage, and death energy damage. The number, power, and range of the javelins depended on Zhou Fang's spirit attribute and skill proficiency. With his upgraded skill ready, Zhou Fang immediately used Bone Javelin against the undead warriors. The powerful javelin struck straight through an enemy's defense. First, its physical power broke through the armor. Then, the corrosive effect weakened the target further, while the poison and death energy continued damaging it. With his new attack, Zhou Fang finally gained the advantage and killed the powerful undead enemies. After absorbing their soul energy, his attributes increased again. His constitution increased by 0.5, and his soul power by 0.5. His agility increased by 0.3, along with another 0.3 soul power, while his strength also increased by 0.3, with another 0.3 soul power. After the battle, Zhou Fang checked his Bone Warrior clone's current status. It had reached the lower Black Iron rank, with 32 strength, 32 constitution, 32 agility, and 30 spirit. The Bone Warrior carried a common white-grade bone spear and bone armor. It also possessed several skills, including Bone Monarch, Skeletal Armament, Brutal Strike, Charge, Weapon Mastery, Parry, and Battle Cry. Its soul power had reached 20. However, Zhou Fang noticed a serious problem. The farther he traveled into the undead wasteland, the stronger the undead creatures became. Because of this, his monster grinding speed had slowed down considerably. After grinding monsters for a long time, Zhou Fang finally returned from the undead wasteland. Exhausted from the fighting, he was relieved that the long night of training was finally over. Back in his room, Zhou Fang opened his status panel to see how much stronger he had become. His profession was still Necromancer, and he had reached the middle apprentice rank. His strength, agility, and constitution had all increased to 3.9, while his spirit had reached 6. His current status was Soul Split. His equipment included an apprentice mage hat, an apprentice necklace, and 2 apprentice rings. His skills had also improved greatly. Bone Monarch meditation method and summon skeletons were perfected, while Bone Javelin and Bone Shield had reached the mastered level. Bone Shackles, Dominate Skeletons, and Serenity were at the proficient level. Looking at his current attributes, Zhou Fang believed he should already be stronger than most students in the same grade. Just then, the system detected that his clone's Bone Monarch skill had reached instinct proficiency. It could now be used as material to deduce an unknown skill for Zhou Fang's main body. The process would cost 10 soul power. Zhou Fang chose to proceed, and the deduction successfully improved his dominant skeleton skill. The upgraded skill could slightly increase the basic attributes of all skeleton-type undead under his command. The exact increase depended on his spirit attribute and skill proficiency. Zhou Fang was satisfied with the result. Most of his existing abilities were either bone type or summoning skills, so improving dominate skeletons would greatly strengthen his summoning abilities. While Zhou Fang was resting, Wenju reminded him that the midterm exam was happening that day and told him not to be late. Zhou Fang assured her that he was already prepared. He was confident that he could get good grades this time. More importantly, he wanted to earn additional contribution points so he could help the orphanage. Wenju told Zhou Fang that he didn't need to worry so much about them. As long as he took good care of himself, both she and the director would already be happy. When Zhou Fang left, the people at the orphanage came outside to say goodbye. They told him to visit again and joked that he should bring more delicious food next time. Zhou Fang happily promised that he would. As he walked away, Zhou Fang became determined. He wanted to take first place in the upcoming midterm exam. However, Liu Hu was secretly watching him from behind a nearby wall. Once Zhou Fang had gone far enough, Liu Hu stepped out with a satisfied expression. He was glad that Zhou Fang had finally left the orphanage. At the school, a huge number of students had gathered for the midterm test. Everyone was excited after learning that simply clearing the test could earn them extra contribution points. They had also heard that the students who ranked in the top 10 would receive additional rewards, making everyone even more eager to begin. The test would take place inside a simulated battlefield, and the rules and reward system were displayed for everyone to see. Several experienced students were also watching the newcomers. One of them joked that if contribution points weren't available, he wouldn't even bother watching these new students compete. Another agreed, saying that most of the newcomers hadn't even reached the middle apprentice rank yet. However, another man warned them not to underestimate this year's students. Nearby, Ye Fan was playing a game on his phone while angrily challenging Fang Zhou. He was determined to defeat Fang Zhou, especially since he couldn't even beat him in the game. Someone nearby recognized Ye Fan's name and mentioned that he was one of the talented new students who had already mastered at least 4 skills. Ye Fan, however, was more concerned about another student who still hadn't appeared. He wondered why his rival hadn't arrived yet. The girl beside him teased him, saying that even if his rival appeared, Ye Fan probably wouldn't be able to defeat him anyway. Just then, the girl noticed Fang Zhou and called him over. Ye Fan immediately challenged Fang Zhou to compete with him in the midterm test. He wanted to see which of them could clear the simulated battlefield first. Fang Zhou wasn't particularly interested in the challenge and casually agreed. Ye Fan confidently believed that this time would be different. He had gone through extremely difficult training during the past week and learned several stronger skills. Because of that, he was certain he could finally defeat Fang Zhou in the midterm test. However, the girl reminded him that he always made the same confident claims. She jokingly suggested raising the stakes, saying that whoever lost should run around naked while doing a handstand. Ye Fan immediately argued that he could run around naked right now if he wanted, but he didn't understand why he also needed to do a handstand. His response left the girl speechless. Meanwhile, Su Xinyan was standing high above the school and watching the students gathered below. As she observed the crowd, her attention fell on Fang Zhou. She had apparently heard about him before and wondered if he was the genius necromancer everyone had been talking about. Su Xinyan smiled with interest, clearly curious to see what Fang Zhou could do during the midterm test.